Chapter 55. As soon as Lu Junfan got up, a pretty maid who was waiting outside came in to help him wash up and put on his clothes. Lu Junfan asked about Miss Xiaohou, but the pretty maid said that Miss Xiaohou was drunk and had not woken up yet. Lu Junfan understood the principle of loosening the reins only to grasp them better. Although the two of them were engaged, they had not really become husband and wife yet. If he wanted to maintain his freshness in Miss Xiaohou's heart, he could not blindly cling to her. So he said that he would go home for the time being. Lu Junfan had been with Madame Yao for a long time and knew her temperament. He knew that she would not let this matter go. After Lu Junfan quietly returned to Yongkong Lane, he first peeped at the corner of the street. Sure enough, there was Marquis Ding of the Yao family in front of his house. He then went around to the back alley and climbed over the wall. He saw that his house had been smashed to pieces as if it had been hit by a war. Lu Junfan remembered that he was about to go to Dunhuang to be the son-in-law of that rich and powerful family, but he did not feel any heartache. Fortunately, his important things were hidden in a secret place. He quietly rummaged through it, and sure enough, the house deed was still there. Lu Junfan took the house deed and climbed out from the top of the wall. He quickly went to the broker house. The broker took over Lu Junfan's business. When he came to take a look, he saw that his house was in ruins. He could not help but frown. Fortunately, Lu Junfan promised him a generous commission, so he spent a little money to hire a few idlers to clean up all the broken things in his house and only sold this empty house. In less than 2 days, the broker found a buyer for him and sold his house for 200,000. Lu Junfan thought that his house was only worth 200,000, which was the price of Miss Xiaohou's wine. He could not help but feel deeply moved. He was even more happy that he had climbed up a high branch. He tactfully told Miss Xiaohou about his house situation. Miss Xiaohou was reasonable and comforted him with kind words. Then she let him stay in her house. From then on, Lu Junfan went in and out of the minister's mansion. The maids and servants all called him Lang Jun. Every day, he indulged in debauchery, dancing and singing. He was as happy as an immortal. However, although Miss Xiaohou was a woman from the western region, her temperament was straightforward. She dared to love and dared to hate, but she was not corrupt in bed. Although they had sworn an oath of eternal love, as if they were husband and wife, it was only in name. She was not willing to have sex. Lu Junfan had no choice but to pretend to be a gentleman and deliberately put on an honest front in order to win the girl's favor. Suddenly one day, Miss Xiaohou received a letter, happily telling him that her father and older brother were about to return from Yangzhou and were already on the way. As soon as her father and older brother arrived, she would report to her father, and they would become husband and wife. However, the Lu family no longer had any direct blood relatives, so it was not easy to live in Luoyang. His words implied that he wanted him to go to Dunhuang with him. Being a live-in son-in-law was very shameful. It was no wonder that the young lady had some misgivings about probing him. But to Lu Junfan, it was exactly what she wanted. He immediately agreed. Amidst her joy, Lu Junfan finally realized that her marriage with the Jiang family had not yet been concluded. Once she married Miss Xiaohou, she would definitely be exposed when she registered with the government. Wouldn't that ruin her future? Lu Junfan was secretly glad that she remembered this early. Early the next morning, she found an excuse to leave the minister's mansion and secretly went to the Jiang family to break off the engagement. Ever since Jiang Sining received Yang Fan's instructions, he told her to wait patiently. There would be a way to make Lu Junfan break off the engagement. Jiang Sining couldn't help but be skeptical, but Yang Fan made a solemn vow. He wasn't like Ma Chiao, who didn't know what to do, so he suppressed his feelings and waited patiently at home. These past few days, Yang Fan left early and returned late, very busy. Jiang Sining asked a few times, but Yang Fan said that he already had an idea and told her to wait patiently. Jiang Sining didn't want to ask again, so she patiently waited at home. Who would have thought that one morning Lu Junfan actually came to break off the engagement? When Lu Junfan came, she was even more anxious than Jiang Suning. She anxiously went to help Grandma Sun and also pulled Su Fongjing over as a witness and immediately broke off the engagement. Jiang Suning finished pressing the handprint and held the peace separation book tightly to his chest, still in a daze as if he was dreaming. Lu Junfan received the peace separation book and also invited a matchmaker and witness to go with her to the Yamen to cancel the records. She felt relaxed and left happily. Lu Junfan hurried back to the minister's mansion. Miss Xiaohou was just about to leave when she saw him return. She happily told him that her father and brother had already returned to Luoyang and would arrive today. She wanted to go outside the city to welcome them, because they hadn't told their father and brother about their matter. It wasn't good for him to come out, so she told him to wait in the mansion. Lu Junfan repeatedly agreed and waited for Miss Xiaohou to bring Chu De, Beta Persei, and a group of servants out of the city. Then she quickly asked the maids to dress him up, put on makeup and flowers, and dressed him up according to the style of the rich young masters of the capital. Then she waited at the middle gate, waiting to rush out to welcome her father-in-law. Lu Junfan waited from noon until the sun was setting in the west. He stood until his back was sore and his legs were numb, and he was about to become a husband-gazing stone, but he still didn't see Miss Xiaohou and her father and brother return. He couldn't help but have a plan. Early morning, Zhuke Avenue. Yang Fan and Tin Ano walked side by side in the crowd. Tin Ano was holding a horse in her hand, and today she was still dressed as a man. She wore a hat, a small lapel, and a narrow-sleeve gown. On her feet was a pair of soft embroidered shoes, and a striped pants slightly revealed, looking neat and tidy. Tin Ano stopped, turned around, and said to Yang Fan, "Even if you escort a gentleman for 1,000 miles, we still have to say our goodbyes. Let's part ways here." Yang Fan stood still and waved away the faint trace of melancholy in his heart. He said softly, "Take care." Tin Ano stared at Yang Fan, wanting to say something but hesitating. The two of them hadn't been together for a long time, but they had experienced a lot together. She had always thought that Yang Fan was just an insignificant passerby in her life, but when they were about to leave, she suddenly felt a trace of reluctance. She thought for a moment and said, "After this farewell, we may not meet again. Before I leave, I have something to tell you." Yang Fan was slightly surprised and said, "Speak." Tin Ano said gently, "In the future, think carefully before you act. Some things can't be solved with knives and swords. Use your brain, and you may be able to solve them. Don't be like this time, thinking about risking your life in the heat of the moment." Yang Fan smiled and nodded, saying, "I will remember your words. Before I leave, I also have something to tell you." Tin Ano said, "Speak." Yang Fan said, "Don't wallow in the past, and don't think of it as a burden. If you live each day as if it's your last, you won't be able to see the future. Don't you know that you look very good when you smile? But I rarely see you smile, except when you pretend to be Xiaohuang." Tian Ainu used her clear and bright eyes to stare at Yang Fan for a long time. Suddenly, she smiled brilliantly, like a firework that lit up. "I will remember your words." Tin Ano said crisply, turned the saddle and mounted the horse. She coiled the reins 3 times, tapped the stirrups, and galloped away, never looking back again. Yang Fan watched her figure disappear into the distance. He only saw her figure disappear at the end of the long street, but he did not see that after turning 2 long streets, she suddenly turned her horse and flashed into an alley. A commotion on the street attracted Yang Fan's attention. Yang Fan looked in the direction of the commotion and saw several officials in silk robes walking over with a green-robed gentleman tied up. They were pushing and shoving each other along the way. The green-robed man was none other than Lu Junfan. There were a few scratches on Lu Junfan's left cheek and bruises on his right cheek. His clothes were wrinkled, and his hair was disheveled. He cut a sorry figure. "Duke, Duke, I've been wronged, I've been wronged." "Damn you! You still dare to cry injustice." One of the officials lashed out with a whip and cursed. "You even dared to lie to Minister Wu, huh? You must have eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's gall. You rented Minister Wu's house and hired a bunch of servants to be extravagant. You owe Minister Wu 400,000 taels. You must be tired of living." Lu Junfan wailed. "Duke, I've already paid back 200,000 taels." "Pa." Another lash of the whip made Lu Junfan tremble. The public servant confidently roared. "Don't tell me you don't want the remaining 200,000 taels to generate interest? You daring liar! How dare you talk back to me?" "Pa, pa, pa! Spare me, I won't do it again. I won't do it again." Lu Junfan fell to the ground, holding her head and wailing. Passers-by stopped to watch and began to discuss. "Minister Wu? Which Minister Wu? Hey, how many Minister Wu are there in our dynasty? It must be Minister Wu Sansi of the Ministry of Rights." "TSK, TSK, TSK. This guy really has guts. He even dared to lie to Wu Sansi? He's really a good man. Good my ass. Now that he's an official, even if he doesn't get beaten to death, he'll be banished for 3,000 miles and sent to guard the border wall. With such a thin body, he—" Hearing the discussion, Yang Fan smiled faintly and walked past Lu Junfan, who was rolling on the ground. Chapter 56. When Yang Fan returned to the Xiaowen workshop, he first went to Jiang Sining's house. As soon as Jiang Sining saw Yang Fan, he said excitedly, "Xiao Fan, this time it's all thanks to you. I wanted to thank you yesterday, but it was getting late and I didn't see you come back, so I went home first. I originally planned to go after I was done with work today." Yang Fan smiled and said, "Sister Ning, you're treating me like an outsider. I truly treat you as my own sister. If something happens to my sister, how can I just stand by and do nothing? You don't have to say a word of thanks anymore." Pasta was so happy that his eyes were brimming with tears. He kept wiping his eyes with his sleeves. After hearing Yang Fan's words, he nodded vigorously. Ma Chiao was like Miss Xiaodong's big black at home. He kept circling around Yang Fan, scratching his ears and saying, "Erlang, quickly tell me, what method did you use to make that surnamed Lu break off the engagement? I saw him run over like his, but was on fire and couldn't wait to divorce Xiao Ning. Quickly tell me, if this riddle continues, I'm going to go crazy." Yang Fan laughed and said, I can't say. Sister Ning doesn't need to entrust her life to someone like him. Why do you need to get to the bottom of it?" Pasta's mother walked out of the kitchen and patted her apron. With a face full of smiles, she said, "Erlang, my daughter didn't jump into the fire pit thanks to you. I don't know how to thank you. It's almost noon. You sit here. Andy will go get a pot of wine and come back with half a caddy of pig head meat to thank you properly. Epsilon Majoris, you stay too. Have lunch at Auntie's place." Yang Fan quickly said, "Auntie, don't be so busy. I treat Sister Ning as my own sister. Don't treat me as an outsider. Back when I first arrived in Luoyang, Sister Ning helped me a lot. Now that I've only helped you a little, why do you keep thinking about it? Oh, right, this matter, it's fine as long as we keep it in our hearts. Don't tell anyone else. If anyone asks, just say that the one surnamed Lu took the initiative to break off the engagement for some reason. Don't say that I did anything. Otherwise, if the one surnamed Lu regrets it in the future, it'll be hard to avoid trouble." Pasta's mother couldn't be careless when it came to her daughter's marriage. She nodded her head repeatedly and kept these instructions in mind. Just as she was about to persuade Yang Fan to stay for lunch, Su Fangzheng strolled in from outside the courtyard. As soon as he entered the courtyard, he shouted, Sister-in-law, are you in the room?" As soon as Pasta's mother heard the noise, she hurriedly went out to welcome them. Su Fangzheng said, "Sister-in-law, didn't that man surnamed Lu from Yongkong Lane take the initiative to come and break off the engagement yesterday?" At the time, I wondered if he had taken the wrong medicine or something. Why did he suddenly find his conscience? Guess what? He really did take the wrong medicine, haha. Su Fangzheng was in high spirits, as he said. Today this kid was taken in by the government officials. Do you think his guts are big or not? Unexpectedly, he pretended to be a wealthy merchant in the western region, moved into the residence of the current Minister of Martial Arts, and swindled and swindled. I think he must have lost his mind. Otherwise, how could he break off the engagement? Would he dare to swindle Minister Wu? In the room, Jiang Sining and Ma Qiao heard everything clearly. Both of them looked at Yang Fan in surprise. They really couldn't guess what method he used to make Lu Junfan break off the engagement. Not only did he make Lu Junfan break off the engagement, but he also made him lose his mind and do such a thing. Yang Fan smiled at Jiang Sining and said, Sister Ning, I'll leave with Epsilon Majoris first. I'll see you tomorrow. Hey, don't go. Let's have lunch here. Before Jiang Sining could finish a sentence, Yang Fan pulled Ma Qiao out of the room. After saying goodbye to Pasta's mother, they slipped away. Because Pasta's mother was busy greeting Su Fangzheng, she didn't want to stop them too much. The two of them smoothly left the Jiang residence. On the way, Ma Qiao still kept asking questions. He wanted to know what method Yang Fan used to make Lu Junfan break off the engagement. Moreover, he even sent Lu Junfan to prison. Yang Fan naturally smiled and didn't say anything. Ma Qiao didn't let it go. The two of them were laughing and joking around when Miss Xiaodong suddenly came from the opposite side. When Yang Fan saw Xiaodong, he quickly took a step back and hid behind Ma Qiao. Almost everyone in the square knew that Xiaodong liked Yang Fan. When Ma Qiao saw that it was Miss Xiaodong, he suddenly had a mischievous heart. He raised his hand and called out, Sister Xiaodong, let's go out. Miss Xiaodong was walking as if there was no one else around. When she heard the call, she narrowed her eyes and came over. Oh, it's brother Epsilon Majoris. When Xiaodong saw his appearance, a smile appeared on her face. Ma Qiao said, Yes, where did Miss Xiaodong come from? Xiaodong smiled and said, Oh, my mother just finished making a set of clothes. I sent it to my client's house and then came back. Where did brother Six go? Ma Qiao flashed and pulled out Yang Fan, who was hiding behind him, and said, I'm patrolling the streets with Beta Persei. Look at you, Beta Persei. Why didn't you say hello when you saw Miss Xiaodong? Yang Fan stared at him hatefully and braced himself to say to Xiaodong, Hello, Miss Xiaodong. Xiaodong didn't even look at him. She came closer and only looked at Ma Qiao. She said slowly and softly, Epsilon Majoris, look at your clothes. They're old and shabby. When you have time, come to my house and I'll take your measurements and make another set. If it's not convenient, it's okay. Just buy it on credit. With the friendship between our two families, Mother won't say anything. Ma Qiao's face changed, and he stammered, No need, Sister Xiaodong, you're too polite. Friendship is friendship and business is business. These two things can't be confused. When I have the money to buy new clothes, I'll definitely take care of your family's business. Now, haha, we still have to patrol. See you later, Miss Xiaodong. As Ma Qiao spoke, he pulled Yang Fan up and ran away as if he was fleeing. Yang Fan grinned and said, Miss Xiaodong really has good taste. She must have taken a fancy to her brother Epsilon Majoris. Ma Qiao was shocked. Don't talk nonsense. I'll have nightmares at night. Yang Fan said, That's strange. Is Miss Xiaodong not good enough for you? Ma Qiao said Xiaodong is a good girl. Of course she's not picky. But her mother... Ma Qiao shivered and said with lingering fear that Auntie Hua is very sharp-tongued and arrogant. She's not easy to get along with. Back then, old Gao's new daughter-in-law complained that her clothes weren't good enough. She blocked the door and scolded her for 3 whole days. In the end, she scolded her so much that she almost hung herself. Her family only accepts son-in-law. If I became her son-in-law, I wouldn't be able to make a comeback for the rest of my life. Yang Fan laughed and said, "Who told you to trick me? You've made a trap for yourself. But as the old saying goes, don't laugh at others. Laughing at others is laughing at yourself." That evening, Yang Fan couldn't laugh anymore. It was the same alley, the same dragon claw pagoda tree, and the same Huang Yuanwei. Beta Persei, Huang Yuanwei. It was the same meeting and the same conversation. What was different was the look in Huang Yuanwei's eyes. Huang Yuanwei warmly looked at Yang Fan and gently said, "Erlang, how have you been?" Yang Fan was baffled and replied, "Thank you for your concern. I'm doing well." Huang Yuanwei sighed and lightly patted his shoulder. He sighed and said, "A man doesn't cry easily. I know you're suffering, but we're men. Even if we lose, we can't lose. Take me, for example. Last time I lost Angela's mudgy, and my wife insisted that I gave it to my lover. She forced me to kneel on the washboard. My conscience is clear. Ahem, look at what I'm saying. Erlang, don't take it to heart and don't be too sad. What's yours is yours. What's not yours can't be forced. As the saying goes, don't bully the young for being poor. Don't think that you're just a worker in the show when workshop. In the future, you might be able to climb up and become a phoenix. At that time, make her regret it." Yes, Huang Yuanwei's priceless advice will be engraved in my heart. But, Huang Yuanwei, what are you talking about? You're still putting up a front. Forget it, I won't say any more. I can't pour salt on your wound. Remember my words, we're men. Our heads can be broken, our blood can flow, but we won't shed tears. We won't lower our heads. Let bygones be bygones. Look forward and think about the future. Huang Yuanwei affectionately patted Yang Fan's shoulder. He clasped his hands behind his back and leisurely went to Nanshan. Yang Fan looked at Huang Yuanwei swaying back and scratched the back of his head. He muttered to himself, "What's wrong with Huang Yuanwei today? Lettuce, mushrooms, shepherd's purse. Hurry up and close the stall. Sell them as soon as you pay. Erlang is here." Second Uncle Song came over with a load of vegetables. He suddenly saw Yang Fan and his voice paused. It looked like he wanted to avoid Yang Fan and take a detour. In the end, Yang Fan caught sight of him. He hesitated for a moment and then walked over with an embarrassed smile. Yang Fan said, "Oh, Second Uncle Song, you're back from your stall. Haha, business is good today. There are only a few dishes left." Yes. Today's business is good. Haha. Second Uncle Song's smile was very careful. He didn't look at Yang Fan. He carried the load on his shoulder and looked down. When he passed by Yang Fan, he deliberately brushed the load over. It was as if Yang Fan was made of paper and would break at the slightest touch. Yang Fan noticed that when Second Uncle Song brushed past him, he secretly glanced at him out of the corner of his eyes. His eyes revealed a look of pity and sympathy. Pity? Sympathy? Yang Fan suddenly had a plan. He thought suspiciously, "What did that idiot Ma Chiao say about me behind my back?" Chapter 57. The young lady who eloped with Beta Persei has eloped with someone else again. It was impossible to determine who the source of this explosive news was. Probably not long after noon. The news began to spread in the Showin workshop. By evening, everyone in the Showin workshop knew about it. Every broadcaster used their imagination to the fullest, further processing and embellishing the story, thus making it sound more pleasant, more touching, more gossipy, and more reasonable. In the end, it was so perfect that even if Yang Fan himself stood up and shouted, "My young lady didn't elope with someone else," no one would believe him. After being collectively recreated by the masses, the current mainstream version of the story went like this. The merchant girl who eloped with Beta Persei was 16 years old. She had snow-white skin and was incomparably beautiful. Unfortunately, she was fickle and fickle. When she eloped with Beta Persei, it was only because of a moment of confusion. Although Beta Persei was handsome, his family was very poor. That rich girl usually lived in luxury and had many servants. How could her delicate and timid body, accustomed to living like a princess, endure such a poor life? As a result, while Beta Persei was working in the workshop, the merchant girl was bewitched by a peddler who walked the streets. In the end, she packed up and eloped with the peddler. Why didn't Beta Persei's family have a meal these few days? It was because the merchant girl had run away with someone else. Why didn't Beta Persei return home these few days? During the day, there weren't many people in the workshop who could see him. That was because he had gone out to find a wife. After Xiao Qianyue lost his wife, he didn't dare to tell his neighbors about it. He was also very careful when looking for a wife, afraid that it would cause rumors and make a joke of himself. But now he puffed out his chest and openly looked for the wife he had picked up. Even if the sky collapsed, there would be someone taller to hold it up. He, Xiaolang, was a lost woman. Beta Persei was a woman who ran away with someone else. This was a fundamental difference. What was there for him to be ashamed of? Sure enough, when he publicized this matter, it did not cause any criticism. Everyone's attention was attracted by the elopement of Yang Fan's wife. Poor Beta Persei is infatuated, but he just had to encounter such a greedy and fickle woman. I don't know if he can overcome this obstacle of love. If he takes it too hard, who knows what he will do? How sinful! The kind-hearted ants and ants gathered together, and as they spoke, they could not help but pull up their sleeves to wipe the corners of their eyes and shed tears of sympathy for him. Yang Fan's good relations with others were fully displayed at this moment. Stop! Stop! Beta Persei is coming. Don't let him hear you. Ah, Auntie Lu, come with me to Nan City at noon tomorrow. I say, Qiao Ci's family. Does Censor Lu's family still hire kitchen maids? The ants quickly changed the topic. When Yang Fan walked over, they gathered together again and whispered. Yang Fan felt very strange. Along the way, all the people he met had strange expressions on their faces. He felt that the people who gathered together to whisper must be talking about something related to him. But whenever he walked over and pricked up his ears, he would always hear things that had nothing to do with him. Ma Qiao, you idiot! Where the hell did you go? Yang Fan began to get angry. Ma Qiao, come over here. In the alley where Pasta's house was, Yang Fan finally saw Ma Qiao. Yang Fan immediately rolled up his sleeves and went to greet him. He grabbed his collar and said through gritted teeth, Ma Qiao, what did you say about me outside? Ma Qiao's expression changed. Xiao Fan, you have wronged me. How can I tell others about this? What kind of relationship do we have? Although we don't share the same mother, we are still good brothers who wear the same pants. How can I gossip about you outside? What kind of person do you think I, Ma Qiao, am? Do you think it's nice for you to embarrass me? Yang Fan loosened his grip in a daze and asked, slow down, slow down. Tell me first, what is it about me? Ma Qiao forced a smile and said, Lil Fan, we're brothers in this world. Why did you hide it from me? To be honest, when I first heard about it, I didn't believe it either. Every time I saw you, you were intimate. How could she be so heartless and leave just like that? But I just went to your house, and she really wasn't there. Only then did I know that it was true. Xiao Fan, for a man to have this kind of thing happen, he really can't hold his head high. But you can't hide it. In my opinion, don't take it to heart. It's good for this kind of woman to leave. If she really stays, sooner or later she will do something wrong to you. I just went to discuss it with Xiao Ning. Yang Fan gradually understood. His expression became a little strange. Brother Qiao, are you talking about Anu? Yes. The people in the workshop think she ran away? Yes. Xiao Fan, don't be sad. I don't feel good seeing you like this. I just discussed it with Xiao Ning. She has a cousin who has just turned 12 this year. You see, you're only 17. If you want to get married, you have to wait another 3 years. At that time, she will be 15 and you will be 20. Auntie Lu said that she will bring the girl here another day and let you two meet first. If you think she is suitable, and the girl's family agrees, you will be married first. If not, it's okay. The aunties in the workshop said that as long as they see a suitable girl, they will definitely bring her to you for a blind date. Xiao Fan, don't think about her. If she left you and ran away, then she is unlucky. A man like you is hard to find. She has eyes but can't see. Yang Fan took a deep breath and asked word by word, Who told you that Anu ran away with someone? Ma Fan looked surprised. She didn't run away. Is she still at home? What kind of nonsense is this? These people are really gossiping. This is great. I will go and talk to them for you right now. Tell them not to ruin your wife's reputation. Yang Fan suddenly lowered his head and his shoulders shook violently. Ma Qiao hurriedly asked, Xiao Fan, what's wrong? Yang Fan lowered his head and endured for a long time before he could resist the urge to burst out laughing. His eyes were filled with tears. He slowly raised his head and said with tears in his eyes, You are right. Anu really left. Ma Qiao looked at him, then suddenly opened his arms and hugged him tightly in his embrace. He said emotionally, Brother, I know you are suffering. If you want to cry, then cry it out. If you cry it out, then your heart won't feel bad. We are men who value friendship. It is not shameful to cry. Yang Fan didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but he really didn't know how to explain it. Tin Ano's sudden appearance had been taken as an elopement girl by the neighbors, and this reason was the most easily accepted and believed by the common people. Now, Tin Ano's departure could also be explained as an elopement, which would save a lot of trouble. So, Yang Fan admitted to this matter. In this way, Yang Fan became the #1 tragic man in the Xiaowen workshop. He had to cooperate with everyone, didn't he? Besides, if he acted as if nothing had happened, it would also arouse suspicion. So, this tragic man changed into black clothes every night and snuck into the Ministry of War to search for the list of Dragon Martial Army generals who had been responsible for escorting the dethroned crown, Prince Li Xian, to Bazhou. During the day, he would walk the streets and alleys, putting on a gloomy and bitter face and accepting people's kind words of comfort. Regardless of whether they were men or women, old or young, everyone gave in and coaxed him. Even Su Fangzheng and Marquis Wu's bad luck, who had always spoken in a rough and loud voice, would speak softly when ordering him to do things. They spread rumors out of curiosity, but this didn't prevent them from expressing their goodwill to Yang Fan. Yang Fan was also happy to use this reason to explain Tin Ano's sudden appearance and departure. The only thing that troubled him was that he had been going on more blind dates recently. In order to avoid the senseless harassment, Yang Fan could only use the excuse that Anu had just left him and was in a bad mood as an excuse to decline them one by one. He declined the good intentions of the aunties and aunties in the workshop. As a result, the tragic man was once again upgraded to the infatuated man. Chapter 58. For 5 consecutive days, the craze of Yang Fan's elopement with his wife had yet to die down. Yang Fan had originally done it on purpose, intending to make use of everyone's misunderstanding to cover up the fact that Tin Ano had left. However, after being comforted by so many people, it was as if such a thing had really happened, causing him to feel uneasy in his heart. These few days he had already heard too many comforting and consoling words. He was in so much pain that he had never known that being comforted by others could be so painful. When this pain fell into the eyes of those who were observant, it naturally had a completely different interpretation. Thus, those who were persuading him put in even more effort. At this moment, the person who was persuading him was Miss Xiaodong. People would always sympathize with those who were more unfortunate than them, and it was easier for them to forgive those who had offended them. When Miss Xiaodong heard the news that Yang Fan's wife had eloped with someone else, her full of resentment melted like snow. When she saw Yang Fan at the door, she immediately stopped and pulled Yang Fan back. Like an older sister, she earnestly consoled him. Erlang, I've said so much, have you listened to me? As a man, How can you be defeated by this kind of thing? If she doesn't want you, that's because she doesn't have good taste. Cheer up, don't be so listless or else I'll look down on you. Yes, 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 I understand. Miss Xiaodong, are you going to deliver clothes to someone? Hurry up and get busy. I will definitely pull myself together. Yang Fan tried hard to straighten his chest and burst into a sunny smile. He only hoped that this overly compassionate young lady would quickly let him go. Xiaodong, haven't you delivered the clothes to the guest yet? Who are you chatting with at the door? Following the voice, Auntie Hua walked out of the courtyard in a very unhappy manner. She focused her eyes and saw that the person standing in front of her was actually Yang Fan. Auntie Hua's unhappy expression was immediately swept away, and she immediately became amiable. Xiaodong, hurry up and deliver the clothes to the guest. Don't let the guest wait too long. Mother wants to talk to Erling. Oh, Xiaodong agreed and finally ended her mental work. Xiaodong carried the clothes and left as if there was no one else around. Auntie Hua kindly said to Yang Fan, Erling, Auntie has also heard about your family's matters. Please don't take it to heart. A real man will never have to worry about not having a wife. A handsome young man like you. Are you afraid that you won't be able to find a wife? Yang Fan screamed in his heart, It's over. It's starting again. He hurriedly straightened his back and pretended to be excited. Auntie Hua, don't worry. These past few days, the neighbors have been trying to persuade me. I've thought it through. It's hard to find a two-legged toad, but there are plenty of two-legged girls. I won't take this matter to heart. That's right. Auntie Hua clapped her hands and beamed with joy. Auntie will tell you the truth. When I first heard that a merchant's daughter eloped to your house, Auntie disapproved from the bottom of her heart. These merchants are different from us workers. Merchants value profits more than benevolence and righteousness. Think about it. Do you think a child who grew up in such a family would have a good character? Erling, this merchant's daughter really can't be a good wife. You don't even have a status. If she leaves, then so be it. There's nothing to be ashamed of. Why do you have to be so dejected? If you really marry this merchant's daughter, who knows what kind of embarrassing things will happen in the future? Auntie Hua looked around and pulled Yang Fan towards the eaves of the door. She lowered her voice and said, Have you heard of Yang Mingsheng, the director of the Ministry of Justice? Yang Fan didn't know why she suddenly mentioned Yang Longzhong, but Auntie Hua's fierce reputation made him afraid. He quickly nodded and said obediently, Yes, I have heard of him. Auntie Hua said mysteriously, Auntie will tell you that Yang Longzhong's wife, Lady Qi, is a merchant's daughter. When she was young, she had an ambiguous relationship with her cousin. Yang Longzhong's daughter is most likely not Yang Longzhong's biological daughter. That child's eyebrows and eyes, no matter how you look at it, are very similar to her uncle's. Yang Fan didn't have the patience to listen to this kind of gossip. But Auntie Hua was in high spirits, and it wasn't good to leave immediately. He could only agree vaguely. Auntie Hua said excitedly, Just say it. He found a merchant's daughter to be his wife. When he couldn't keep an eye on her, she had an affair with her husband and ruined his family's reputation. If he wasn't careful, he would even be raising a child for her. Speaking of which, Dr. Yang didn't have a choice back then. Although he was a scholar, his family was very poor. His studies and examinations were all supported by his wife's family. Later on, when he entered the official career, it was his wife's family who used money to smooth things over and help him get a good job in the Ministry of Justice. I remember at that time Oh, yes, Zhanggu. At that time he was a Zhanggu official in the Ministry of Justice. His mouth was tied because he ate from others, so his wife could do whatever she wanted. If you married a merchant's daughter and had a rich father-in-law, would you be able to raise your head in front of your wife? In the end, you would still have to obediently be manipulated by others. Take Yang Longzhong, for example. When he was a Zhanggu official in the Ministry of Justice, he was already an official. But he served his wife at home more diligently than he did in the Yamen. His daughter's background was unclear, but but he pretended to be deaf and mute and endured it. His wife, on the other hand, was very arrogant. I remember that when Lady Qi was about to give birth, Yang Zhonggu happened to leave Dongdu for Shaozhou on official business. He was thousands of miles away, and he was gone for 2 or 3 months. He didn't come back until the child was almost 1 month old. However, Lady Qi didn't let it go. She insisted that her husband heard some gossip and found an excuse to leave the capital. In a rage, she took the child and went back to her mother's home. She did something wrong to her husband, but she still dared to be so arrogant. What right did she have? Wasn't it the power of her mother's family? Poor Yang Zhonggu went to his father-in-law's house, knelt and kowtowed to his father-in-law and begged for forgiveness. Only then did he invite his wife back. But in less than 2 years, Yang Zhonggu was promoted. Since then, his career has been smooth, and he has been promoted step by step. Now he is a minister of the Ministry of Justice. It's different from before. With Yang Longzhong's high position and power, Lady Qi and the eldest daughter of the Yang family have had a hard time these past few years. Originally, Yang Fan was very impatient to listen to her talk about other people's family affairs. But he had been in Luoyang for so long and had always been investigating Shaozhou. He was very sensitive to this name. Suddenly hearing the 2 words Shaozhou from Auntie Hua's mouth, his heart suddenly thumped, and he hurriedly asked, "Auntie, is what you said true?" Auntie Hua said, "How is it not true?" At that time, Auntie was a needlemaker in the Yang family. Others may not know about the Yang family's affairs, but those who worked in the Yang family's inner courtyard, who didn't know. At that time, Lady Qi was so powerful and domineering, and how Yang Zhonggu swallowed his anger. Auntie saw it with her own eyes. Yang Fan hurriedly said, No. Your nephew is asking about Yang Longzhong's official business in Shaozhou. Is this true? At that time, Yang Longzhong was just a small Zhonggu. If the imperial court had any official business that required them to send people thousands of miles to Shaozhou, they couldn't possibly send a 9th-ranked official, could they? Auntie Hua said, "Hi. Auntie is a woman. How could she know about official business? Auntie doesn't know who should be sent and who should not be sent." But Yang Zhonggu left Dongdu for 2 to 3 months. This is absolutely true. At that time, I was a needlemaker in the Yang family, so I heard it clearly. When Lady Qi was venting her anger on Yang Zhonggu, the first aunt was right beside her. She heard Yang Zhonggu explaining to her that he was ordered by his superior to go to Shaozhou for a very important mission, which was why he came back late. He swallowed his anger and explained it to her several times. How could Ani have heard it wrong? "Oh, Ani, what year was it?" "That year. Oh, I can't remember clearly. The imperial court's era name is always changing. Ani doesn't even know what year it is this year." "Hi. Anyway, it was 2 months before the birth of the Yang family's daughter. That's why I say you really can't marry a merchant's daughter, especially since you're not an official and have no money. If others bully you, you won't be able to live happily with a beautiful wife." Yes. Ani Hua's words have enlightened me. I'll keep it in my heart." Yang Fan nodded his head in agreement, secretly making a mental note of this matter. Finally, Ani Hua, who was a chatterbox, stopped talking and went home with satisfaction. Yang Fan also left in a hurry. He had already learned some information about Yang Longzhong from Auntie Hua. If he abruptly asked Auntie Hua about Yang Longzhong's appearance, or the age of the Yang family's eldest daughter, if something happened to Yang Longzhong in the future, he couldn't guarantee that Auntie Hua wouldn't think of him. So he had to find another way. Yang Fan wandered around the square. He took the initiative to chat with those people who had nothing better to do at the alley entrance. Under his indirect questioning, he quickly found out the information he wanted to know. The Yang family's daughter was 7 years old this year. 7 years ago was the 2nd year of Yongchun. The end of that year was changed to the 1st year of Hongdao. The month of the girl's birth was the beginning of summer 7 years ago. According to Auntie Hua, Yang Longzhong went to Shaozhou 2 months before the child was born. He came back 1 month after the child was born. These 3 months coincided with the time of the murder. Was this Yang Longjong the person he was looking for? Chapter 59. It wasn't easy to become an official in the Tang dynasty, and the aristocratic families were still the main providers of court officials. At this time, most of the quotas for the so-called imperial examinations were in the hands of the major clans. How many famous poets and scholars couldn't even muddle their way to an official position at the age of 50? Even if they were to become an official, they couldn't even dream of becoming a 7th-rank official without the backing of a major clan. It was easier said than done for a commoner to stand out, but Yang Mingsheng had risen from a small director of the Ministry of Justice to the 3rd highest position in the Ministry of Justice in just a few years. Who was the disciplinary officer of the Ministry of Justice? One step up would be the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Justice. Above him were only the 2 positions of Minister and Assistant Minister, but he could already be considered an important official in the court. Yang Mingsheng wasn't born into an aristocratic family, nor had he married into a noble family. How could it be so easy for him to sit in this position? Yang Fan's heart was full of doubts, but he couldn't be sure that Yang Longjong was the person he was looking for. Yang Longjong was a director of the Ministry of Justice and a civil official. Coincidentally, there was also a civil official at the scene of the murder. Apart from the soldiers of the Dragon Martial Army, there was only one civil official. He clearly remembered the civil official's appearance. He wanted to take a look at this Yang Longjong's appearance before deciding what to do next. However, there weren't many people who had seen Yang Longjong. Most people in the workshop knew Yang Longjong's house, but very few had seen Yang Longjong. Even the shopkeeper of Marquis Wu's shop and Basho had never seen Yang Longjong in person. With their status, even if they were to visit, they were only qualified to chat with Yang Longjong's steward. The disciplinary officer was of high status and power. How could commoners like them have the chance to see him? Even workers like Yang Fan and Ma Chiao, who were responsible for opening the workshop, could only see the carriage of 4 horses driving out of the Yang residence when they opened the door every day. The next day, Yang Fan woke up very early. He was not in charge of opening the workshop this month, so there was no need for him to wake up so early. Yang Fan found a random excuse to strike up a conversation with the stall-keeper and took the initiative to help him buy breakfast. He hurried to Jiang Sunning's stall and bought 2 bowls of noodle soup. When he walked back to the main gate of the Yang mansion, the red lacquered gate of the Yang mansion opened on time. When it was Yang Fan's turn to open the gate, he had to welcome and send the officials' carriages and horses to the court every day. The Yang residence was located at the first bend of the entrance to the Fong Square. The residence's gate faced the cross street inside the Fong Square, so he was very clear about the time Yang Longjong opened and left the Fong Square every day. On the other hand, Yang Longjong always went out on time, never early, never late. The door opened. The hinges of the Yang residence's main gate must be regularly oiled and maintained, so that when the gate was opened, it would be soundless. When the red lacquered gate opened, the sunlight shone on the door, rippling with a bloody light. Yang Fan could not help but squint his eyes slightly. A few servants walked out of the Yang family and lifted the tall threshold to the side. A carriage with 4 horses and 4 horses slowly came out of the courtyard. The carriage, surrounded by a few puffed-out slaves, drove towards the entrance. The servants at the back lowered the threshold again. Yang Fan suddenly picked up a big wooden bowl and walked over. Ouch! Yang Fan cried out, as if he had just seen the Yang family's carriage. He wanted to dodge, but in his haste he tripped on the uneven ground and fell forward. The bowl of noodle soup splashed out, splashing onto the head and face of a slave. "Damn it, you little beast! How preposterous!" The slave flew into a rage and reached out to grab Yang Fan. His claw stretched out, but for some reason it was stuck in the greasy bowl. "Huh, you're so unreasonable. I accidentally tripped and fell. I was just about to apologize, so how could you hit me?" Can the rich and powerful be so unreasonable? Yang Fan stretched his neck and cried out, The slave's claw missed, and his head and face were covered in grease. He was already very annoyed, and when he heard Yang Fan complain, he was so angry that his whole body trembled. He stepped forward and grabbed Yang Fan's collar, about to punch him. Yang Fan immediately shouted at the top of his lungs, "Someone come quickly! Fellow villagers, come and see. The people of Yang Langzhong's family are bullying us." A group of bored commoners surrounded them. Yang Fan, who was very popular with women, immediately received the enthusiastic support of the aunties and wives. "This is too unreasonable. How can they be like this? Even if they are powerful and influential, they can't bully people like this. Stop!" The slave threw a punch. Yang Fan covered his head with both hands and used his forearm to block the punch. The slave was about to throw a second punch when a dignified shout suddenly came from the carriage. The bamboo curtains were slowly rolled up, revealing a cold and solemn face. Yang Mingsheng, about 40 years old, had a slender neck, a hooked nose, and a pair of sharp eyes. He slightly turned his head and looked out of the carriage. His disdainful eyes were like a vulture looking down at its prey from a high vantage point. It was very intimidating. In particular, the two deeply sunken wrinkles on both sides of his nose caused his face to reveal an extremely cold and stern expression. Yang Langzhong coldly asked, "What is it?" "Ah Lang, master. This rascal splashed soup all over my face for no reason." The servant quickly explained the situation to Yang Mingsheng. Without waiting for Yang Fan to speak, many people around helped Yang Fan. He was just careless. "Wasn't it because he wanted to avoid your carriage? He has already apologized. Killing someone is just a matter of nodding his head to the ground. What else do you want?" Yang Mingsheng's brows slightly wrinkled. He withdrew his hawk-like sharp gaze and lightly said, "Let him go. Go back and change your clothes. You don't need to accompany me to court today. Let's go." The bamboo curtain was slowly lowered, covering his upright and still body. The commoners, to him, were just ants under his feet. If an ant climbed onto his feet, he would just flick it away. Who would be angry with an ant? The carriage rumbled away, and the people who had gathered to watch the show also dispersed. The ant that was ignored by Yang Langzhong was still staring in the direction of his departure, motionless. That pair of sunken eyes, that hawk-like nose, that sharp and cold gaze, that meticulous hair, and especially those two ravine-like wrinkles, were like magnets that deeply attracted his eyes. Yang Fan's eyes gradually rippled with a bloody shadow. The scene in front of him was sometimes hazy and sometimes clear. He seemed to see a verdant valley, a burning village, mutilated corpses, and mournful and desperate cries. He seemed to see his elder sister running in the mountains like a doe, watching her head fly. All kinds of scenes changed in his mind. The background was always Yang Mingsheng's infinitely magnified image. Sunken eyes, hawk-like nose, and two deep wrinkles. Kill! Kill them all! Don't let a single one go! The fierce and gloomy voice kept echoing in Yang Fan's ears, getting louder and louder. The blood, the fire, and the corpses were all diluted by the louder and louder voice. Finally, only the face with the sunken eyes and hawk-like nose was infinitely magnified, covering the entire valley, rippling in the blood-red flames. Under the ravine-like wrinkles, the mouth opened and closed, roaring, "Kill! Kill them all! Don't let a single one go!" Yang Mingsheng, it was him. He was Yang Mingsheng. Yang Fan would never forget Yang Mingsheng's appearance for the rest of his life. At that time he was still young. He was lying in the grass with a clump of weeds covering his body. Only a pair of frightened eyes could be seen. He could only see this person. This person's appearance had been deeply engraved in his mind since then. He didn't know how many times he had woken up from nightmares. Many years had passed and he rarely had nightmares, but he had never forgotten this image. He had never forgotten it. The heavens had pity on him. He had finally found the cruel official with the sunken eyes and hawk-like nose, who said there was no heaven's will. Wasn't this the will of heaven? Elder sister, father, mother, Yang Fan's eyes were lightly covered with a layer of tears. He raised his face and blinked away the tears in his eyes. Then he lowered his head and walked back. A heart-palpitating smile quietly appeared on his lips. Chapter 60. When night fell, the doors closed one after another. Other than Marquis Wu patrolling the streets from time to time, there was no one else to be seen. In the Xiaowen workshop, there were few houses that were still brightly lit. In the southeast corner of the workshop, Feng Yuanwai's house was currently hosting a banquet for distinguished guests that had come from afar. In the northwest corner, there was a brothel where music was being played. In the dim light of the night, decadent sounds drifted in spirals. In Yang Fan's small room, the lamp was as small as a bean, and it was extremely quiet. A mouse poked its head out from the corner of the wall. It seemed to be a little uneasy because of this unusual silence. It squeaked twice and finally gave up and went back into the hole in the wall. The dim light shone on Yang Fan's body. Yang Fan was kneeling on the ground, dressed in neat short clothes. He had already retrieved the bundle from the bird's nest. At this moment, it was untied and spread out on the table. Yang Fan took out a sharp short knife, tested the sharp edge with his finger, and inserted it into his waist where it was easiest to pull out. Then he took out a small sword and gently inserted it into his leggings. Finally, he took out a mask. This mask had a green face, red eyebrows, and 2 snow-white fangs. In the night, it looked extremely terrifying. This was the exorcism mask that could be bought anywhere on the street. Yang Fan gently placed the mask on his knees, waved his hand to extinguish the candle, closed his eyes, and quietly waited. Bang! 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 The sound of night watchmen faintly came from afar. Yang Fan's thoughts were surging in the blood. The people running for their lives in the mountains and valleys, the arrows and blades that hunted them down like hunters, the fallen bodies, men, women, old people, children. A green-robed civil official with sunken eyes and a hawk nose reined in his horse and stood on a high slope. He coldly ordered, "Kill! Kill them all! Don't let a single one go!" Yang Fan's body suddenly trembled. His eyes suddenly opened. It was as if 2 electric lights suddenly flashed in the dark room. Then the light gradually disappeared and it became ordinary. Superior martial arts not only cultivated the body, but also the mind. His mind was already more stable and dignified than most of his peers. Strategy is the most important. Plan before you act. This was something his father had once explained to him when he was young. At that time, he had completely disregarded these words, but for some reason, he could often think of them now. After a long time, Yang Fan gently put the mask on his face, and he turned into a ferocious ghost with a green face and fangs. Yang Fan slowly stood up and flashed out of the room like a ghost. In a simple and elegant study room, there were some antiques and historical books on the bookshelves on both sides. Under the wall, there was a table with curved legs and rolled ears. On the table, there was a veiled lamp, paper, ink, brush, inkstone, and a stack of files. Yang Mingsheng, the disciplinary officer of the Ministry of Justice, was sitting cross-legged behind the desk. Behind him was a huge screen with calligraphy on it. Lines of large, ink-stained characters were written on it. The Han clan has its own system. Originally, it was based on the tyrannical Tao. How could it allow pure virtue to be taught and use Zhoujin? Moreover, secular Confucianism is not suitable for the times. It is good that it is ancient and not modern. It causes people to be dazzled by its name and not know what to guard. How can it be appointed? Therefore, those who use the country, establish righteousness as a king, establish faith as a tyrant. The higher one can be a king, the lower one can be a tyrant, and use tyranny to support the way of the king. Yang Mingsheng took a sip of tea and flipped a page of the file. He continued to read seriously. The tea was not clear because salt, pepper, ginger, jujube, cheese, and other seasonings were added to the tea. The soup was stewed in a big pot. The taste was really not good for modern people, but that was how the tea ceremony was at this time. At this time, tea was not a popular beverage in the upper class of the Tang dynasty. Other than the people of Sichuan, only monks and Taoists liked to drink tea. The people of Sichuan were the first to drink tea. The people of Sichuan who had developed a sense of taste began to drink tea as early as the Western Han dynasty. However, this habit was limited to the local people. Yang Mingsheng was from Sichuan, so he had this habit that was not popular in Luoyang. Yang Mingsheng finished reading this page of the file. He picked up the cup and took a sip of tea. He gently pushed the teacup with blue glaze and white flowers to the side. He narrowed his hawk-like sharp eyes and looked at the closed file in front of him. He stroked his beard and fell into deep thought. At this time, a figure jumped into the courtyard of Yang Langzhong's house like a ghost. Yang Langzhong's house was magnificent and took up several acres of land. However, it was still quiet at night. There were only a few lanterns hanging at the corners of the corridors. The lanterns gently swayed in the night wind, emitting a dim light. At this time, many rich families did not have fixed rules for building houses. They would build houses according to different topography or according to the interests and hobbies of the owner. Therefore, the architecture of the houses was not the same, and it was not easy to judge where the owner lived based on experience. Moreover, Yang Fan had been overseas since he was a child and did not know much about the layout of the big families in the Central Plains. However, he was patient. After sneaking into the Yang's house, Yang Fan did not rush into action. He stood quietly for a while. Although it was only separated by a wall from the cross street, he had never been to the Yang's house before. He first familiarized himself with the scenery and layout of the courtyard, then crouched down and felt his way into the back of the house. Suddenly, he stopped behind a cluster of flowering trees. He keenly noticed that there was a lamp in the corner of the corridor. Under the lamp, there was a big black dog lying lazily. Yang Fan's brows furrowed slightly. The Yang's raising a vicious dog was troublesome. A dog's sense of smell and hearing was far more sensitive than a human's. It could detect the intrusion of a stranger from far away. If it barked a few times, it would attract the attention of the guards of the house, and that would be very bad. Yang Fan cautiously moved closer. When he was still a distance away, the black dog suddenly raised its head and looked left and right. It sniffed its nose alertly, as if it had sensed something strange. Yang Fan immediately stopped and did not move forward. He had wanted to kill the night guard dog, but just as he was about to act, his heart suddenly moved and he suddenly thought of a problem. Yang Mingsheng is the disciplinary officer of the Ministry of Justice. He is in charge of prison litigation and has a high position and power. The security in his house cannot be too lax. Since there is a night guard dog here, is there a night watchman? Hua Shaoqian stood under the osmanthus tree for a long time. The night wind was a little cold. He wrapped his cloak tightly around himself and took a deep breath. The osmanthus tree was full of sweet fragrance, and the smell was quite refreshing. Hua Shaoqian was a qualified night watchman. The position he chose was very good. This position was in the corner of the courtyard, and he could see the whole courtyard. No movement could escape his eyes, and no matter which direction someone came from, it was not easy to find the night watchman standing under the tree, dressed in colorful clothes that were almost the same color as the bark of the tree. With his back against the tree, he did not have to worry about a sneak attack from behind. There was a faint sound of clappers coming from the street. Hua Shaoqian listened carefully. It was almost midnight. In another hour, the shift would change. He had stood for a long time, and his feet were a little sore. He wanted to jump onto the sweet-scented osmanthus tree and sit on the overgrown branches to rest. After enduring for another hour, he could go back and have a good sleep. A gust of wind blew, and some osmanthus petals fell from the tree. Hua Shaoqian loosened his grip on the hilt of the knife, bent his knees, and jumped up. Every other night, Hua Shaoqian would be on watch for 4 hours. He would always choose this spot. Every night, when it was quiet, he would jump onto this osmanthus tree to rest. Thus, he knew this osmanthus tree like the back of his hand. He didn't even need to lift his head to know what the osmanthus tree looked like. He knew that there was a horizontal branch that could support his weight and that it was very comfortable to sit on. Hua Xiaoqian was good at martial arts. With one jump, he jumped about 10 feet high. Then he stretched out his hand. When his hand reached out, it should be able to touch a branch. As long as he reached out, he could pull himself up, and with a twist of his waist, he could sit on the branch with his back against the tree and smell the fragrance of the flowers. But this time there was something unexpected. Just as his body jumped up, he felt his shoulders sink and his mouth was tightly covered. The hand that was about to grab the branch was tightly gripped by a large hand that was like an iron pincer. It was twisted in a strange position to his back. If he used even the slightest bit of force, he would feel unbearable pain. When he landed back on the ground, there was an extra person behind him. The moonlight shone on his back, and 2 figures appeared on the ground. "Silence! If you don't want to die." This was a hoarse and old voice. Hua Xiaoqian only needed to move slightly to know that he had no way to resist. He quickly nodded to indicate that he was willing to cooperate. The hand covering Hua Xiaoqian's mouth loosened slightly and slid down to his throat. Hua Xiaoqian's throat was tightly gripped. The force from the fingers was very strong. He knew very well that if he screamed, the hand would immediately crush his throat. "Who is this elder? Do you know that this is the mansion of Yang Longzhong of the Ministry of Justice?" Hua Xiaoqian immediately revealed the identity of his master. He hoped that the other party was a thief or a great thief who had mistakenly barged in without knowing the identity of the owner of this mansion. Thieves did not fight with officials and did not dislike trouble. After all, there were only a few thieves who went against the government. Moreover, Yang Longzhong was an official in charge of the Ministry of Justice and Prison. Great thieves and thieves were even more unwilling to deal with him. Unfortunately, he was disappointed. The old and deep voice hoarsely said, "This old man has come for Yang Mingxing." Chapter 61. Hua Xiaoqian rolled his eyes and asked hesitantly, "Sir, you are?" The old voice chuckled. "Do you think I will tell you?" Hua Xiaoqian said, "I am just looking after the house and making a living. Please have mercy on me." The old voice said, "I have no enmity with you. Why would I kill you? I want to accumulate some good fortune for my children and grandchildren. As long as you listen to me, I will not hurt you. Speak. Where is Yang Mingxing now?" "Lang Zhong is asleep." "Where?" "In the main room of the second courtyard." "Good, take me there." Hua Xiaoqian was silent. The person behind him sneered. "If you want to be loyal, that's up to you. Maybe Yang Mingxing will remember to compensate your family." Then the iron fingers on Hua Xiaoqian's throat tightened. Hua Xiaoqian was shocked and quickly said, "I am telling the truth. Lang Zhong, he is still in the study." The old voice harumphed and said, "I knew you were lying. Bring me there, and I'll spare your life. Otherwise, I will take your dog life." "Very well, I will promise you." "Sir, please don't go back on your words. I always keep my promises." Hua Xiaoqian wanted to move forward, but the fingers on his throat tightened and pulled him back. The cold voice said, "Wait, take care of that black dog first." Hua Xiaoqian said with a bitter face, "How should I take care of it?" The voice behind him sneered, "Don't tell me you are not familiar with it. The night watchman and the night watchdog are not familiar with each other. If you move, it will start barking. Wouldn't that be a joke?" Hua Xiaoqian's last hope was shattered. He had no choice but to call out, "Xiaobai! Xiaobai!" The black dog was called Xiaobai. Yang Fan, who was standing behind Hua Xiaoqian, was speechless. The big black dog had just poked its head out to look around, but didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. It had already crouched down again, but when it heard the call, its ears perked up. Hearing that it was Xiaoqian calling for it, it ran over while shaking its head and wagging its tail. After all, an animal was an animal, and its intelligence could not be compared to that of a human. although its six senses were abnormally sensitive, and even a high-flying ranger could not avoid its eyes and ears. At this moment, the intruder was right in front of it, but because it was accompanied by a familiar person, it could not distinguish between friend and foe. Little White ran to Hua Xiaoqian's side and lowered its head to sniff the tip of his boots. It then raised its head and wagged its tail at him. Perhaps in the black dog's heart, it thought that Hua Xiaoqian was bored and called it over to play. The old voice behind him spoke again. "Looks like you're really familiar with it. Since you can control it, that's for the best. Take me to the study in the backyard. Since the dog doesn't bark, why kill it?" When Hua Xiaoqian heard the words of the person behind him, he quietly let out a sigh of relief. If the person behind him was not even willing to kill a dog, let alone a human, it seemed that as long as he was obedient, there was still a high chance of survival. Hua Xiaoqian even thought, maybe this night walker did not intend to harm the doctor, but just wanted to complain. These people in the pugilistic world are very strange, so this reason is not impossible. This thought made Hua Xiaoqian feel a little better. He softened his voice and said to the black dog, "Little White, be a good boy and go back to sleep. Go, go, go." The black dog seemed to understand his words and ran back to the house in a flash. It lay on the ground, still looking in their direction. Yang Fan held on to Hua Xiaoqian and slowly walked forward. They walked past the black dog, around the side of the house, and walked along the dimly lit corridor. The big black dog did not bark, and even wagged its tail at them in a friendly manner. The two of them walked to the backyard, passed through a moon gate, and followed a small path in the flower beds to the left. At the end of the path there was a small building, and on top of it was a lit window. Hua Xiaoqian stopped and said, "This is the place." Other than Yang Mingsheng, who else is there in the building? This I do not know, but usually when the doctor deals with official matters, he only brings a page boy with him to serve tea and grind ink. Good. If you are not lying, I guarantee that you will see the sun tomorrow morning. As soon as he finished speaking, Hua Xiaoqian's ears shook, and his whole body fell to the ground, completely unconscious. Yang Mingsheng was reviewing the case of Xiao Qiangjin, the younger brother of the British minister Su Jingye. Su Jingye was the grandson of Su Shiji, one of the 24 meritorious officials of the pavilion of Lingyan. Su Shiji defeated the Turks and Goguryeo. Together with Li Jing, he was known as the two famous generals of the Tang dynasty. He had served in the 3 reigns of Gaozu, Taizong, and Gaozong, and was regarded as a pillar of the imperial court. Later, Gaozong Liji wanted to make Wu Meinyang empress, but Zhang Sanwuji and a group of Guanlong faction officials strongly opposed it. Although Wu Meinyang's family also belonged to the Guanlong faction, Zhang Sanwuji and his group approved of the empress candidate, Empress Wang, the daughter of the Guanlong Wang family. At that time, Su Shiji, who held military power, expressed his support the critical moment, and Wu Meinyang was successfully conferred as empress. Therefore, at that time, Empress Wu and Su Shiji's family were very close, like family. Unfortunately, the honeymoon would eventually pass. Later, Empress Wu's authority grew, and she wantonly executed members of Li Tang's imperial clan, demoted and killed ministers loyal to Li Tang's imperial clan. Su Shiji's grandson, Su Jingye, who had inherited the title of Duke of England, was also demoted to Lu Province's major. When Su Jingye passed through Yangzhou, he happened to meet Tang Ziqi, Luo Binwang, and a group of people who were also demoted. After a discussion, they raised the banner of supporting Li Tang and began to oppose Wu. In the end, they failed not long after. Su Shiji's direct descendants, except for a few who heard the news and escaped, hid their names and escaped, the rest were all executed. In her rage, Wu Zetian not only issued an imperial edict to demote Su Jingye's grandfather and father, 2 generations of official titles, she also ordered people to dig up Su Shiji's grave. The coffin was chopped to pieces with axes, and the corpse was whipped with leather. The depth of her anger could be seen from this. Of course, Yang Mingsheng knew that although the Empress Dowager was a woman, She was not a narrow-minded, vile person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. The Empress Dowager was a man of great talent and bold strategy. Whatever she did, she had her reasons. She would not stretch out her sharp claws for no reason, just to show off her power and prestige, or just to vent the anger in her heart. All of her actions had an extremely profound meaning. All of the above was to punish the chicken to warn the monkey. In the last few years, Empress Wu's movements were frequent. She already had the intention to overthrow Li Tang's order, to take over the world and replace him. But a woman sitting on the world's throne, this had never happened since the beginning of time. It was very difficult. If she did not use cruel and ruthless methods, how could she make the heroes of the world submit? Killing Li Tang's imperial family, even killing her own son and grandson, was for this purpose. Killing Li Tang's loyal officials was also to cut off the obstacles. Using cruel methods to attack the opponents was also for this purpose. And now, Xiao Qiangjin was arrested and brought back to the capital for trial. His confession was all there. The truth was already clear. Why did the Empress Dowager still ask the Ministry of Justice to reopen the case? The Empress Dowager's real motive to be so cautious? It was likely that the drunkard had ulterior motives. It seemed that the Empress Dowager wanted to use the Xiao Qiangjin case to cut off some branches and roots of the big tree that was Li Tang. This swaying tree that was on the verge of collapse. The Empress Dowager placed people like them in an important position. It was making the best use of their talents. If they could not understand the intentions of their superiors and use the Xiao Qiangjin case to do something that satisfied the Empress Dowager, how could they receive the Empress Dowager's favor? Since he understood the Empress Dowager's true intentions, Yang Mingxing's thoughts became smoother. He narrowed his eyes and thought, the Empress Dowager gave the case of Xiao Qiangjin to Assistant Minister Zhou, and Assistant Minister Zhou gave this case to me to handle. It seems that Assistant Minister Darren also wants to smuggle goods. This case needs to be used well. If it is done well, we can suppress Lai Suo. This chance cannot be missed. Right now, there were 4 ruthless officials among the Empress Dowager's subordinates. They were Qiu Xinji, Zhou Xing, Lai Junqin, and Sua Yuanli. On the surface, these 4 were in cahoots with each other and were the public enemies of the world. But there were factions among them. Qiu Xinji was the second son of Qiu Xinggong, a meritorious official of the early Tang. He had always been in the army and was now the great general of the left Golden Guards. The autumn official assistant minister, Zhou Xing, was originally from the capital's Chang, and was also the son of an aristocratic family. When he was young, he began to study law and later became an official. He was the minister of Shangshu province, the assistant minister of agriculture, and was placed in an important position by the Empress Dowager. He became the autumn official assistant minister and was in charge of the Ministry of Justice. These 2 people were both from aristocratic families, so they had a good relationship and formed a faction. And Lai Suo was Lai Junqin and Sua Yuanli. These 2 were just scoundrels from the streets and had relied on informants to become officials. They did not fit in with Qiu Zhou. On the surface, they were polite, but in private, they fought fiercely for power and favor. Yang Mingxing was on Zhou Xing's faction, and naturally would not let go of such a good chance to show off his faction's power. Before Xiao Qiangjin had been escorted to Jing, he had already been considering how to use this matter to cause a calamity of imprisonment. In fact, Xiao Qiangjin's confession was not important, and it was also not important whether he had a confession or not. What was important was to first understand the Empress Dowager's intentions and then decide who to deal with. Yang Mingsheng was thinking hard. Downstairs, the little errand boy, Mu Ninger, was holding a large cattail leaf fan and fanning the charcoal fire to boil tea. He threw 2 pieces of charcoal into the fire, and the slightly dimmed flame lit up again, reflecting a red light on the small clay stove. Mu Ninger yawned and muttered sleepily, "Al Lang is staying up late again, making me unable to sleep." As soon as he finished speaking, a palm appeared on his shoulder. The palm was like a knife, and with a slanted slash, the little errand boy fell asleep. His body shook, and his whole body fell backwards. His body was gently supported by a pair of hands and slowly placed on the ground. Then a hand reached out, grabbed a rag from the short table, rolled it twice, and wrapped it around the handle of the pottery pot on top of the stove. Holding the pot of boiling tea in his hand, he slowly walked upstairs. Chapter 62. Yang Mingxing sat behind the desk and analyzed the thoughts of Empress Wu and Assistant Minister Zhou Xing. He stroked his beard and smiled. As long as he could understand the intentions of the higher-ups, this case would be easy to handle. He quickly drew up a list. The Empress Dowager's revolutionary intentions were becoming more and more obvious. The people he planned to choose were either those who did not have clear support or those who had been promoted during Gaozong's reign. They were more loyal to Li Tang. In short, he could use this case to kill or demote them, remove the obstacles to the revolution, and gain the favor of the Empress Dowager. Then, he had to consider Assistant Minister Zhou's intentions. Therefore, the Marquis of Nanyang and Minister of Autumn official Zhang Chujin, who had a more ambiguous attitude toward politics, were also included in the list. The Autumn official was the Ministry of Justice. The present minister of the Autumn official was Zhang Chujin, and the assistant minister of the Autumn official was the leader of his faction, Zhou Xing. Once Zhang Chujin fell, Zhou Xing would naturally become the Minister of Justice, an official of a fu. This was probably what Assistant Minister Zhou would be happy to see. For Yang Mingxing, drawing up this list was easy, but for other people it was not so easy, because the various factions in the imperial court were intricate and complicated. The various powerful ministers were not as strictly divided as the common people imagined. On the contrary, they were intertwined. Today they were enemies, tomorrow they would be friends, and they would change back and forth. Therefore, moving one hair would affect the entire situation. Which factions could not be touched, which factions to be roped in, which factions the Empress Dowager wanted to eliminate, which people to target without implicating other factions and causing a large backlash. This required great knowledge. If someone did not understand the factions in the officialdom and took out a list, it would be poking a hornet's nest. Zhang Chujin was a person who could be killed without attracting too much interference from other powers. After all, there was still a layer of separation between him and the Empress Dowager. Killing Zhang Chujin and pleasing Zhou Xing was the most pressing matter at hand. Thinking of this, Yang Mingxing reached out to touch the teacup again. At this time, Yang Fan came upstairs with a steaming pot. Yang Longzhong, who had been feeling slightly tired, smelled the thick fragrance of tea and became alert. He planned to work through the night and confirm the names of all these candidates. He would also list their crimes and report it to Assistant Minister Zhou tomorrow morning for a decision. Yang Mingxing looked at the resumes of the officials and the information about their relationships in all aspects. Without raising his head, he ordered, "Mu Dinger, pour a cup of hot tea first, and then light up the candle a little." Wooden Nail didn't answer. He just walked over and placed a pot of steaming hot tea in front of Yang Mingxing. Qi. Another curtain was torn into long strips. This was a bolt of water-wave silk from the Run province of Jiangnan. It was extremely expensive, but in Yang Fan's hands, it became a rope to tie people up. Dr. Yang, who was tightly bound, revealed a look of ridicule in his eyes. He was already tied up like a big rice dumpling, but this nightwalker wearing the exorcism ghost mask was still cutting the cloth. Was he afraid that he would break out of his cocoon? Yang Mingxing didn't feel much fear. Since the matter was like this, there was no use in being afraid. To be able to work for so many years and reach his present status, he had seen many great scenes, experienced many bloody storms. He would not be so scared that his lips were white and his face was green. When Yang Fan tied him up, he was even less worried. Since the other had tied him up and not killed him, he clearly had a request. Since he had a request, he did not need to worry about the danger to his life, at least temporarily. Seeing the ridicule in his eyes, Yang Fan stopped what he was doing and explained seriously, "I'm not afraid that you will run away. I'm afraid that you won't be able to endure the pain and will break free from the rope. You have been in charge of the penal prison for many years. You should know that when torture is carried out, the pain of the tortured is extremely great, and this unbearable pain can allow an ordinary person without the strength to truss a chicken to display astonishing power. His voice was still old. The only parts of his body that were exposed were his hands, which had been smeared with ginger juice. After the ginger juice dried, there was a wrinkled layer. Even an old official like Yang Mingsheng, who had been immersed in the penal prison for many years, couldn't immediately see through it. After listening to Yang Fan's explanation, Yang Mingsheng's heart skipped a beat and a chill immediately rose up. Finally, he began to reveal an expression of fear. He understood the cruelty of punishment all too well. A person who is not afraid of death might not be afraid of the torture of punishment. The cruelty of punishment was enough to destroy the will of a valiant general who had gone through hundreds of battles on the battlefield. Seeing the deep doubt and fear in his eyes, Yang Fan slowly said, "Don't worry, I will ask you in a moment. If you can answer all my questions, then you won't have to suffer any physical pain." As he spoke, Yang Fan was sitting on a short table. The files, brushes, and ink on the table had all been swept to the ground by him. He sat on the table in a grand manner with a steaming cauldron on the side. Yang Mingsheng was kneeling in front of him with his hands tied behind his back, like a prisoner waiting to be interrogated. Yang Fan twisted the cloth into something like a rope and stretched it with his hands. Satisfied with its sturdiness, he then got up and walked behind Yang Mingsheng. He tightened the rope around Yang Mingsheng's face and twisted it left and right. In a moment, he had made something like a horse's head. He pulled one end in his hand, and the other end was placed on Yang Mingsheng's mouth. As long as he tightened it, Yang Mingsheng would not be able to make a sound. Yang Fan's saber had already been sheathed at his waist. He did not dare to hold it in his hand. As long as he had the sharp saber in his hand, looking at Yang Mingsheng's grim and stern face and the two deep wrinkles under his nose, Yang Fan had the urge to cut off his head. But he could not, at least not yet. He knew that the murderer was not just Yang Mingsheng, who was the general who had cut off his elder sister's head with a saber. At that time, they were just little generals, little civil officials. Who was the real mastermind behind them? The answer to all these questions could only be found in the person in front of him. He wanted to know why someone would want to massacre their small mountain village. What was the reason? They had been living well in that valley, standing aloof from worldly affairs. Whether it was his parents or the other people in the small village, they were all so kind. He had never seen them harm anyone. So why did a group of people suddenly rush out and cruelly kill them? They were not a group of bandits, nor were they a group of robbers. They were a group of nobles from the eastern capital. That was why, after they burned down the village, the Xiaozhou government, who did not know their true identity but knew that they had a great background, kept it a secret. That was why they used the excuse of a plague outbreak to erase the injustice of hundreds of lives in this small village from the world. Yang Fan raised his foot and ruthlessly stepped on Yang Longzhong's shoulder. Yang Longzhong let out a muffled groan and fell forward. Before his forehead could heavily touch the floor, Yang Fan used all his strength to pull on the silk chewing in his hand. Yang Longzhong's body was suspended in the air. Yang Fan bent down and took out the cloth to gag his mouth. In a deep voice, he said, "You can speak now. If you want to be a muddle-headed ghost, then shout loudly. I will not hesitate to stab you." Yang Mingsheng was in a sorry state as he knelt on the ground with the chewing cloth in his mouth. The feeling of being ordered around like an animal made him feel exceptionally humiliated. He forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart and gasped for breath as he asked, "Who are you? What enmity do we have between us?" "Enmity that cannot live under the same sky." Yang Mingsheng laughed hoarsely and said, "What a joke! This Yang enforces the law for the imperial court. Those who commit crimes, when they fall into this Yang's hands, will naturally be severely punished. If the families of all the criminals in the world come to seek revenge on this official, how could it be your turn? Oh, Yang Fan slowly said. In Lingnan Xiaozhou, 20 miles to the northeast, there is a nameless valley. In the valley there is a small village. According to the Xiaozhou government, the name of the village is Tao Yuan Village. There are hundreds of families in the village. I want to know, what crime did they commit to be punished by slaughtering the entire village? Men, women, old and young, not a single one will be spared. Northeast of Xiaozhou, nameless valley, Tao Yuan Village, Yang Mingxing's voice was full of doubts. It seemed that the massacre of hundreds of lives had been completely forgotten by this big shot. He slowly repeated it. Suddenly his body shook and he cried out involuntarily, "Ah! Xiaozhou, Lingnan Xiaozhou. Who are you?" Yang Fan tightened his grip and reined in the chewing cloth. He sternly said, "I'm the one asking you, speak." Yang Fan loosened the cloth. Yang Mingxing's head hit the floor with a bang, but he did not feel any pain. He gasped and asked, "Who are you? Who are you? Are you one of He Lan Min's clique?" Chapter 63. He Lan Minji? Yang Fan was startled. He did not know who was connected to the small village he was in. This was the first time he had heard of the name He Lan Minji. He secretly remembered this name in his heart and sternly said, "Who I am is not important. You only need to tell me who sent you?" Yang Mingxing strangled the rope in his mouth. He vaguely laughed. "I thought that the village had been razed to the ground. Everyone had been killed. Unexpectedly, there was still a fish that escaped the net." Yang Fan said in an awe-inspiring voice, "The heavens spared my life for today's retribution." Yang Mingxing, who sent you there? Quickly say it. Yang Fan's foot exerted force. Yang Mingxing was stepped on until he was kneeling on the ground. His face was slanted to the floor, and he could not help drooling. He was in an exceptionally sorry state. He gasped for breath and said, "Why did someone need to send me? Could it not have been me who wanted to kill people?" "You," Yang Fan sneered, "you are not worthy. You were just a dog at that time, a dog that was ordered by someone." Yang Fan fiercely stepped on the soles of his shoes, causing Yang Mingxing's hooked nose to twist and deform. He coldly said, "I have already investigated. That year, you, Yang Langzhong, were still a small zhanggu. What qualifications did you have to lead troops out of the capital? How much courage did you have to dare to kill people and slaughter an entire village, not leaving a single one alive? How much ability did you have to make the Xiaozhou government turn a blind eye to it and spend so much effort to clean up the aftermath?" In the face of Yang Fan's series of questions, Yang Mingxing only had a sinister expression on his face as he sneered. Yang Fan sneered, "It seems that you will not shed tears until you see the coffin." He tightened the rope in his hand, his foot still firmly stepping on the back of Yang Mingxing's neck, causing his head to be raised high. Yang Mingxing immediately discovered that the devil-masked man had already raised the steaming pot in his hand. "Are you going to admit it?" The muscles on Yang Mingxing's face kept twitching in fear, but he still gritted his teeth. When he found out where the other party came from, he knew that today's situation would not be easy to solve. If he refused to reveal the secret in his heart, he might still have a chance to live. But once he revealed the truth, he would definitely be doomed. Yang Fan sneered, tilting the pottery pot in his hand bit by bit. Yang Mingxing's eyes widened, and his pupils shrank to the size of needle tips in fear. The boiling soup in the cauldron turned into a line and dripped down from the air. The hot steam scattered towards Yang Mingxing's forehead. Yang Mingxing suddenly closed his eyes. Before the boiling soup reached his body, he writhed and screamed in fear. Puff, puff, puff! When the boiling water touched his body, there was a puff, puff sound. Yang Mingxing's painful roar was stuck in his throat and could not come out. He trembled violently because of the boiling soup, and his muscles were as tight as steel. The rope made of silk soap in Yang Fan's hand was very strong. It creaked when he twisted his body, but it did not break. Yang Fan raised his hand slightly, and the boiling water stopped. "Who ordered you to do it?" Yang Mingxing closed his eyes, gritted his teeth, and shook his head. His forehead and cheeks were red, and a patch of blisters quickly floated up from his forehead, which looked extremely terrible. "You won't cry until you see the coffin." Yang Fan sneered, and his hand slightly tilted. The boiling soup rolled down again. Yang Mingxing was like a catfish that was stepped on by his shoes, constantly struggling and twisting, but he could not get rid of his control. The boiling water dripped down, and the skin on his forehead was turned upside down. Blood and tea were everywhere. "Will you tell me or not?" Puff, puff, puff. "Will you tell me or not?" Puff, puff, puff. The boiling water gradually moved to Yang Mingxing's eyes. Yang Mingxing struggled violently for a few times, and with a sudden strong struggle, he almost broke free from Yang Fan's control. Then his body straightened, and he passed out. Yang Fan's hand did not stop. He slightly tilted his hand, and the boiling water continued to pour down, pouring on Yang Mingxing's eyes. His thin eyelids were scalded, and the boiling water was poured directly on his eyes. Yang Mingxing's body instinctively trembled, but he did not wake up. After a while, even the body instinctively trembling reaction disappeared, because the body where the boiling water was poured had been completely cooked, and there was no longer any feeling. The pottery pot in Yang Fan's hand was completely turned over. The boiling water had been poured out, and the boiled tea splashed on Yang Mingxing's face. Yang Fan put down the pottery pot, let go of his chewing, and slowly sat back on the table. The eyes behind the mask flickered slightly. Yang Mingxing's stubbornness was beyond his expectations. It seemed that the preparation in advance was indeed useful. Calculating the time, it should be about time. After an unknown period of time, Yang Mingxing groaned and slowly woke up. As soon as he opened his eyes, he found that there was only darkness in front of him. He was immediately ecstatic. That thief left. But immediately he heard a voice that sounded very calm, but was as terrible as the devil's. "You're awake? Are you willing to tell me now?" Yang Mingxing was shocked. "That devil is still here." Just as he was about to scream, his cheeks tightened as the rope tightened around him. An unbearable pain assaulted his heart. If he could see his own appearance, he would definitely be scared to death. His eyelids could no longer be seen, and his face was full of bloody blisters. His eyeballs had been scalded by the boiling water, and they were protruding out of their sockets. The silk rope was very strong, and had already cut into the scalded flesh on his cheeks. His white gums were exposed, and he looked like a ghost. But Yang Fan, who was standing behind him, did not feel a trace of fear. He had killed people. Although Nanyang was small, there were also criminals and rebels. When he was very young, he followed his master to catch bandits and quell rebellions, but he had never tortured people. But in his dreams, he had used all the methods he could imagine to torture a person more than once. That person was the person in front of him, the person who had coldly shouted, "Kill! Don't leave a single one alive. Kill them all." The person who gave the order, the spray of blood, the sister's flying head, burned his heart like boiling oil, making him suffer, and he no longer had any fear. Yang Mingxing's face was covered in blood, pus, and all kinds of bodily fluids. The two grim lines on his face could no longer be seen. There were only bubbles of blood, pus, and tea leaves. At this moment, he was not a ferocious ghost, but he was even more ferocious than one. "My eyes!" Yang Mingxing let out a desperate cry from his throat. He finally realized a ruthless reality. He could not see anything. His eyes were dark, not because the lights in the room were off, but because his eyes were blinded by the scalding water. Blind, he was blind. He could no longer be an official. His future was completely ruined. Yang Mingxing's eyes were dark, and so was his heart. The double blow of his body and mind made him faint again. "Ah!" Yang Mingxing slowly regained consciousness. He groped around and cried out in despair, "Just kill me! Just kill me!" The old and cold voice rang in his ears again. "The blood feud is as deep as the sea, and hundreds of lives were lost. Wouldn't killing you be letting you off easy? Tell me or not. If you don't, I don't mind giving you all the torture I can think of. You are a disciplinary officer, so you should be very confident that no one can endure all the torture, right?" Yang Mingxing's body trembled, and he shouted hoarsely, "Devil! Devil! You are a devil!" The old voice said coldly, "That's right. I am a devil. Yang Langzhong, this is all thanks to you. Ha!" Before the laughter died away, there was a sudden explosion. The door flew up with a bang and crashed into the antique shelf on the opposite side, smashing into pieces. Two figures rushed in, shouting sternly, "Stop thief!" Just as Yang Fan threw away the silk rope in his hand, the two guards pounced on him, the padao in their hands like a wheel, wrapping around Yang Fan's waist. They came from the western province and were Yang Mingxing's troops, the troops of military generals. To be chosen by Yang Mingxing as imperial guards, their martial arts were naturally extraordinary, not to mention that they grew up in the western region and had a fierce nature. The two padaos in their hands swung wildly, creating a gust of wind. Yang Fan hurriedly pulled out the short knife from his waist, and there was a clang, 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 clang sound as the two ferocious padaos chopped down. Yang Fan, who was holding the short knife, narrowly avoided the sure-kill knife strikes and retreated all the way to the corner of the wall. When Yang Mingxing heard the clashing of weapons, he wriggled excitedly on the ground, enduring the great pain, and held incoherently, "Kill him! Chop him into mincemeat for me! I want him alive! I want him alive! I want to kill him with my own hands!" There was a fierce and ferocious battle in the study, and there was a burst of crackling noises. The bookshelves, low tables, and thin curtains were all destroyed, and the whole room was filled with debris, as if a hurricane had just blown through. Boom, boom, boom. Outside the study, a dozen or so people holding weapons, knives, and swords rushed into the study. Some of them rushed to support Yang Mingxing, while others joined the battle and surrounded Yang Fan. Yang Fan laughed loudly. "Bastard, this life of yours is destined to be mine. Today, I will temporarily leave it, and I will come back to take it in the future." As he said this, the short knife in his hand suddenly shone brightly, dancing into a dazzling light wheel, forcing the approaching guards to retreat. He turned around and leaped out of the window. "Chase!" The two guards chased after him, leaping out of the window like fish. Three figures, one in front and two behind, disappeared into the boundless night in a few leaps. Woof! Woof woof! Little White dutifully barked, wildly. Chapter 64. When the early morning bells and drums once again converged into an extraordinarily lively piece of music, the Xiaowen workshop welcomed the morning sun of a new day. Today, the commoners in the workshop were not in a hurry to go out on the streets, because the atmosphere in the workshop was a little strange. A few officials from the Luoyang prefectural yamen stood at the entrance of the workshop, and a few burly men in official robes and sabers constantly walked in and out. Today was an even day, so there was no need to attend court. However, those officials who had always lived in this workshop, and the commoners rarely saw their faces in 10 years, had all woken up early. One by one, they walked out with grim expressions, and all walked towards Yang Langzhong's house. Even the usually frivolous marquis, Wus, were neatly dressed today, with sabers at their waists. They patrolled the streets with solemn expressions, neither whispering to each other, nor glancing left and right. Luoyang Commandant Tang Zong and Ministry of Justice Adjunct Xiao Junyu hurriedly walked through the main door of Yang Langzhong's house, their expressions extremely grave. Basho Su Mohan stood on the steps of his house, shouting at the workers he had summoned early in the morning, who were all listlessly yawning. "Don't speak! Be quiet and listen to me." Su Fangzheng raised his voice and said, "Last night, A thief snuck into Yang Longzhong's house and beat Yang Longzhong until he was crippled. Lawless. Truly lawless. The imperial court is furious and has ordered a strict investigation of the culprit. Yang Longzhong is a member of our show and workshop, so we have to be even more spirited and work hard. Ho Lizy, if you speak again, see if I don't slap you. Su Fangzheng took out a ladle from the large vat, scooped up half a ladle of cold water, and gulped it down in one gulp. He threw the ladle away and once again stood on the steps. With his hands on his hips, he said, "Listen up, I will now take you to Marquis Wu's shop. Under the lead of Marquis Wu's, you will be interrogated according to the areas you are usually in charge of. One by one, the so-called interrogation was simply a formality, and the effects of the investigation could be imagined. Actually, everyone knew that Marquis Wu and the workshop attendants could not be counted on. But since something had happened, all parties had to show that they cared, and it was just a matter of appearance. Bad luck and Hu Minglei of the show and workshop waited for Su Fangzheng to arrive. They assigned some tasks to Marquis Wu and the workshop workers, telling them to go about their own business. Just as these people were sent out in a hubbub, an official came to the door and told them to immediately see Luoyang, Commandant Tang's zone. At this moment, young Master Tang was at Yang Mingxing's residence. Hu Minglei and Su Mohan rushed to Yang Mingxing's residence and saw many officials going in and out of the residence. There were also many officials dressed in official uniforms or casual clothes. The two of them were led to a study by the third steward of Yang residence. Luoyang Commandant Tang Zong was there, and so was Qiao Junyu from the Ministry of Justice. The reason why Tang Zong had called them here was because of a matter. Before the criminal left, he had arrogantly declared that he would come to take Yang Longzhong's life. Since he had said so, the authorities could not ignore it. But when he would come, who could say? Although the imperial court attached great importance to Yang Longzhong's case, and the Assistant Minister of Justice, Zhou Xing, had even personally investigated the case, no one could transfer a large number of officials to Yang Longzhong's residence and make it their home for the long term. Luoyang Prefecture could not transfer that many officials, so they might have to use Marquis Wu and the workshop workers. Tang Zong explained the situation to Hu Minglei and Su Mohan, asking them to each send 10 Marquis Wu and 20 workshop workers to the Yang residence to help keep watch. Naturally, the two of them did not dare to refuse, and when they returned, they discussed who to send to the Yang residence. Guarding the residence was a tough job, and although there was money to be earned, those Marquis Wu were not willing to do it. Moreover, they heard that Yang Longzhong had been blinded, so who would be willing to risk their lives in the Yang residence when the criminal was so ruthless? So they tried all sorts of excuses, and for a while, this one had a headache, that one had an itchy butt, and all sorts of other problems came up. Hu Minglei was so angry that his teeth hurt, and he forcefully sent a few weak and obedient Marquis Wu. When he saw that the quota was still not enough, he took the list of the remaining people and carefully considered who had a distant relationship with him, who had a close relationship with him, and who had some family background. After weighing the pros and cons, he carefully chose. On Su Fangzheng's side, it was even more of a headache. He knew all the information on the 100 or so workshop workers, and in terms of background, these workshop workers did not have any powerful backgrounds, but there were always some who were related to him, and some who had always been filial to him. If he did not take care of them now, when would he do it? He squinted his eyes and was calculating who he could send, when Ma Qiao and Yang Fan walked in with their shoulders swaying. Ma Qiao raised his voice and said, "Basho, the two of us have turned the 7th and 8th songs upside down, and there is nothing unusual." Su Fangzheng smiled, and his smile was like a blessing from the heavens. He said, since you've searched it, then there's no need to care about it anymore. Epsilon Majoris Beta Persei, the two of you, quickly go home and pack. In a while, go to the Yang Longzhong Fu to report. In the future, you will only be on night duty at the Yang Fu and do not need to pay attention to the matters of the workshop. Yang Fan was stunned when he heard this. This was not what he had planned, but This accident seemed to be developing in a better direction. When the Empress Dowager heard that the vicious and stubborn person had entered the food to commit murder, she was very angry. Assistant Minister Zhou has already received verbal orders from the Empress Dowager and has ordered the department to investigate this case. I believe that the heavens have a long reach, and the culprit will definitely be brought to justice. Brother Yang, do not worry. Brother Yang has just applied medicine. Please rest well. We will bid farewell now, and we will visit another day. Everyone take care. Yang Mingxing raised his hands in a hoarse voice as he sent them off. His entire head was wrapped in white cloth, and there were only slits left for his nostrils and mouth to allow him to breathe, eat, and take medicine. He looked like a stiff mummy. His upper body had already been undressed, because the boiling water had burned the skin of his upper body until it was festering in many places. In this era, if a wound became infected, it would inevitably be life-threatening. So after applying medicine, he was also securely tied up with white cloth. As a result, his movements became extremely stiff. His arms could not bend, and he needed other people's help to sit or lie down. Even though Yang Mingxing did not have a close relationship with his colleagues, they were colleagues. Seeing him tortured to such a state by the criminal, the officials couldn't help but sigh. Luoyang Commandant Tang Zong and Councillor Qiao Junyu of the Ministry of Justice stood up to send the guests off on behalf of Yang Mingxing, and accompanied the visiting officials out. There was a burst of chaotic footsteps in the room, and then it gradually quieted down. Yang Mingxing listened attentively. Feeling that everyone had left, he touched the bed with his hands and called out, "Mu Dinger, Mu Dinger!" "Ah Lang, I'm here." The little attendant Mu Dinger, who was waiting at the door, hurried over and held his hand. Yang Mingxing listened attentively and asked, "Have all the officials left?" "Yes, Ah Lang, they have all gone out. Tang Zong and Qiao Junjun have sent them off on behalf of Ah Lang." Yang Mingxing sighed and asked worriedly, "In the room, are you the only one here now?" Mu Dinger was confused by Yang Mingxing's strange behavior and replied, "Yes, only I am here. If Ah Lang wants to see someone, I will go and call him." No. It's good that you are here. It's good that you are here." Yang Mingxing's fingers were also bound by bandages, so he couldn't bend them and grab Mu Dinger's hand. In a moment of desperation, he used both hands to clamp Mu Dinger's arm. Because of the pain, he didn't dare to use too much force. Mu Dinger saw him like this, but he didn't dare to pull his hand out. Yang Mingxing struggled to breathe for a while, then lowered his voice and said, "Mu Dinger, go out. Go to the right function guard, see Middle Minister General Kai Dongcheng, and tell him everything about me. Tell him that I want to see him. Just say, Taoyuan evil ghost, revenge. He will definitely come. Remember, don't tell anyone else." The Fengchen Guard was the Thousand Ox Guard. The Thousand Ox Guard was named after the Thousand Ox Saber. The Thousand Ox Saber was sharp enough to cut 1,000 oxen. The Thousand Ox Guard wielded the Thousand Ox Saber and was the Emperor's bodyguard. In the 5th year of Tang Gaozong's reign, the left and right Thousand Ox Guards were renamed the Left and Right Thousand Ox Guards, and in the 2nd year of Long Shua, they were renamed the Left and Right Fengchen Guards. The Fengchen Guard consisted of 1 great general, 2 middle minister generals, 12,000 ox guards, 100 reserve soldiers, and 150 main soldiers. All of them were high-ranking imperial guards with outstanding skills. Yang Mingxing was now blind and had become a complete cripple. His future as an official had been destroyed in a day, and he had suffered a mental blow. But once he calmed down, he immediately ordered his personal attendant to find this person. What did this person have to do with him? Mu Dinger nodded repeatedly and said, "Ah Lang, I understand. I will wait for a while. Go immediately." "Yes, I will go now." Mu Dinger hurriedly agreed and turned to leave the room. Yang Mingxing sat on the couch and sat silently for a long time. From his black, hole-like mouth, there was a strange hee-hee laughter. It sounded like he was laughing, but also like he was crying. He did it on purpose. I know, he did it on purpose. He purposely let me go. He purposely destroyed my future. He was not willing to kill me. He wanted to use me as bait, to catch a big fish for him. Ha 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 ha. Yang Mingxing's mouth made a series of whimpering sounds, as if he was crying, but the place where his eyes should have been was covered with a white cloth. Not a single tear flowed down. Chapter 65. Yang Fan, with his whistle stick in his hand, mingled with a group of unwilling, miserable, and unlucky fellows. He also had a bitter expression on his face as he swaggered into Yang Longzhong's house. From afar, they looked like a group of slow-witted penguins walking back and forth on the beach. Yang Fan pretended to be bitter, but in his heart he was laughing so hard that his belly was about to burst. He had devised several follow-up plans for the pursuit of the criminal, but he had never imagined that he would actually be sent to Yang Longzhong's mansion to help the Yang family catch the thief at night. The officials of the Ministry of Justice and Luoyang Prefecture carried their padeos, and with grim expressions they hurriedly paced back and forth in Yang Longzhong's mansion. Both open and hidden sentries were being arranged everywhere. Yang Fan and his group were brought to the busy Luoyang Prefecture Commandant Tang Zong. Looking at the whistle sticks in the hands of the workers, Tang Zong frowned and ordered, "Give them the padeos!" When a few officials appeared with padeos in their hands, the workers holding whistles immediately became restless. These brave and ruthless youths usually only had a whistling stick as their weapon, although they were unwilling to work in the Yang residence. When they saw the fine workmanship and sharp padeos, they couldn't help but feel a little excited at the sight of them. One by one, the padeos were handed to them. Yang Fan gripped the padeos in his hands tightly and carefully examined the sharp edge of the blade. His finger lightly touched it, and along the curved blood groove, he lightly drew a line upwards. The cold gleam of the blade was like a mirror, reflecting his gaze, and it was as sharp as the blade. Yang Fan blinked and restrained the sharpness in his eyes. Beside his ear, a rough voice loudly berated, "Take it! With a knife in your hand, do you think you're the young hero of Chang'an? Ah, bah! How can we rely on a group of trash like you to catch this kind of high-flying thief? What the Xiaofu wants is your pair of eyes and your mouth. When you see a thief, you shout, understand?" The scolding stopped, but saliva was still flying in the air. Yang Fan picked up his sleeve and wiped the saliva off his face. He looked at the burly man with a full beard and asked blankly, "What?" "Take this." A drumstick was stuffed into Yang Fan's hand, and then a copper gong with a hemp rope tied to it was hung on his thumb. Big Beard curled his lips and shook his head. He walked up to the second shopkeeper and said in a bad mood, "Stupid fool, all of you are like this. Here, take it. For you, this is the thing that can save your life." Yang Fan held a drumstick in one hand and a gong in the other. He looked at the worker on his left, who was given a waist drum, while the worker on his right was holding a bamboo whistle in a daze. He couldn't help but burst out laughing after the weapons and equipment were distributed. They were brought to a place to rest. Although they were on night duty, it was impossible for a group of people to stay up all night. If 2 shifts were to rotate, they would need a place to rest. The Yang mansion originally had guest rooms, but there were only a few of them, and they had already been occupied by the few officials who stayed in the Yang mansion. The rest of the officials could occupy any room they wanted. When this batch of Marquis Wu and the shopkeepers were assigned, they had to be arranged according to their status. Finally, when it was Yang Fan and Ma Chao's turn, they were assigned to a woodshed. There was a broken straw mat on the ground, and they threw down their bedding. This would be their nest from now on. The 2 of them threw down their bedding, and before they could sit down to catch their breath, the officials shouted for them to gather again, saying that it was an errand. Tang Zong stood on the steps with his brows furrowed. He was actually extremely dissatisfied with these sloppy Marquis Wu and the shopkeepers, but the Ministry of Justice and Luoyang Prefecture had limited manpower. Moreover, they didn't know when the murder would come again, so it was impossible to mobilize a large number of officials from the Ministry of Justice and Luoyang Prefecture to guard Yang Longzhong Mansion. Left with no choice, they could only mobilize the Marquis Wu and the shopkeepers. No matter how stupid these Marquis Wu and the shopkeepers were, they should be smarter than that big black dog, right? When the time came, there would be a sentry every 3 steps and a sentry every 5 steps. Using the tactic of overwhelming numbers, no matter how capable one was, how would one be able to sneak into Yang Longzhong's sleeping quarters without a sound? Seeing that everyone had gathered at an extremely slow pace, Tang Zong collected his thoughts and gave them a lecture. He explained to them the rules that they should follow in the Yang Mansion, and taught them how to react if they discovered the flying burglar, how to hide, and how to sound the alarm. After explaining everything, he began to assign them tasks. Their tasks were similar to what they usually did in the streets, patrolling and keeping watch, but instead of patrolling in the streets, they were patrolling in Yang Mingxing Mansion. The murderer was a flying burglar who could come and go as he pleased, and if they were to really meet him, they might end up as ghosts under his knife. Therefore, being an open sentry was obviously more dangerous than being a secret sentry. Everyone understood this. So when Tang Zong said to arrange a secret sentry, the crowd of Marquis Wu and the shopkeepers swarmed forward and volunteered. Their enthusiasm was breathtaking. An open sentry that roams everywhere. A trace of treachery flashed across Yang Fan's eyes, and then he also joined the ranks of the competitors. Unfortunately, Beta Persei was still a young man and could not compare to the burly and strong men. When he finally squeezed in front of Tang Zong, he raised his head and saw Luoyang Lieutenant Tang Zong's finger, as thick as a carrot, pointing at his forehead. Let's start arranging the roaming sentry. In Yang Longzhong's bedroom, the room was filled with the strong smell of medicine. Yang Mingxing sat hugging a blanket and said passionately, "This official is loyal to the imperial court, and I am indebted to the Empress Dowager and His Majesty's trust. Ever since I took charge of the Department of Justice, this official has been fair and strict in enforcing the law, and I abhor evil. All these years, I don't know how many corrupt officials, bandits, and so-called wandering swordsmen have been punished." Qiao Junyu interrupted him and said, "In other words, Lang Zhong does not know who the person who entered the mansion to seek revenge is? Which case did he come for?" Yang Mingxing was silent for a moment and then nodded slightly. He said, "Yes, that person seems to have a great hatred for this official. After restraining this official, he continuously abused and vented his anger. He gritted his teeth and said that this official caused the destruction of his family, but he never said who he was or why he hated this official." Qiao Junyu muttered to herself for a moment before replying, "From what the murderer said to your residence's imperial bodyguard, Shao Qian, that old man's family has children and grandchildren. This is also consistent with his aged voice. If that's the case, then the person who had been punished by Lang Zhong should be one of this old man's children and grandchildren. The Ministry of Justice has already taken out all the case files that Lang Zhong has handled in these years, and the low-ranking officials are carefully combing through them from beginning to end. The families that have fathers or ancestors and their families were implicated, so they were sentenced to assassinate at the border, will be investigated. Lang Zhong, do not worry. Your case has even disturbed the Empress Dowager, and Assistant Minister Zhou was very angry when he heard the news. The court will definitely find the perpetrator." Yang Mingxing chuckled and raised his stiff arms. He called out Qiao Junyu's courtesy name. "Zi Ping, this one was persecuted by a traitor, and my entire life was ruined by his hands. I will leave the matter of arresting the perpetrator and returning justice to you." His words were sincere, but the laughter seemed to be slightly disdainful and strange. Hearing this, Qiao Junyu couldn't help but frown. If this was a normal time, Qiao Junyu would not dare to frown. As an official, Yang Longzhong had always been rigid and upright, serious in speech and manner. The officials of the Ministry of Justice usually did not dare to change their expressions in front of him. But at this time, no matter if you frowned, rolled your eyes, or even made a face at him, he would not see it. Qiao Junyu frowned and stood up. She held onto Yang Langzhong's arms and said in a deep voice, "Langzhong, rest well. This one will do his best and not disappoint Langzhong." Stepping out of Yang Mingxing's bedroom, Qiao Junyu thought to herself, "Yang Langzhong's words are not entirely true. There seems to be something else going on." Yang Mingxing's official rank was too high. The prison officials that had arrived first did not have the qualification to ask him about the case until Qiao Junyu's group arrived. When Qiao Junyu arrived, the doctors were busy treating Yang Mingxing and giving him medicine. When the doctors finished, officials who had heard the news came to the Fu to inquire, causing the matter to be delayed. In the end, he did not obtain anything useful from Yang Mingxing. Based on his many years of experience in handling cases, and the fact that Yang Mingxing had undergone a great change and could not be as calm and serious as usual, he could vaguely see some clues. "I fear that Yang Langzhong is hiding something." Qiao Junyu thought, "I'll just do as Yang Langzhong said and report the truth to Assistant Minister Zhou Xing. I definitely cannot speak of this suspicion. With Assistant Minister Zhou's intelligence, he will definitely detect it. If he wants to, he will come and ask Yang Langzhong. As an official, one should not tread in waters that one does not know the depth of. Curiosity can kill people." Chapter 66. Beta Persei, take this pot of tea to the West Wing. Beta Persei, take the 4 bedding sheets that have just been moved out from the storeroom to the side courtyard to dry and get rid of the mold. Beta Persei, take these 2 lunches to the rear residence. These are the lunch for a few officials from the Ministry of Justice. Yang Fan busied himself around the Langzhong's residence, successfully changing from a patrolling sentry to a moving errand boy. The reason was simple. He was a good subordinate. The bailiffs from the Ministry of Justice and Luoyang Prefecture would definitely not personally do this kind of work. If they really wanted to catch the robbers, they would have to rely on them. These bailiffs lived on the edge of a knife, so how could they do some lowly work? The Marquis Wu, who had been transferred to the Langzhong's residence, had a lower status than them, but they felt that they were nobler than the workers. Naturally, they were not willing to do anything. As for the workers, everyone was ranked according to seniority. The big fish ate the small fish ate the shrimps ate the worms, and the worms ate the mud. In the end, Yang Fan, the young and inexperienced mud, became the errand boy. Of course, this was not without Yang Fan's active cooperation. This identity made it easier for him to understand the situation in the Yang residence. "Xiao Fan, where are you going?" An old man in his 50s walked towards them. He wore a green robe with a round neck and a green handkerchief. Behind him was a strong man with a saber. Yang Fan raised his head and saw that it was the head steward of the Langzhong's residence, Lu Hen, and the saber-wielding warrior behind him was Ma Qiao. Yang Fan held the lunches and stood still. He first greeted steward Lu politely, then smiled at Ma Qiao and said, "Marquis Wu told me to take some food to the officials from the Ministry of Justice." Ma Qiao said unhappily, "Those bastards are ordering you to do things again." "Xiao Fan, don't be too honest. Kind people get bullied." "Why?" Yang Fan said with a smile, "Hey, it's not a big deal. I'm young, so it's not a big deal for me to walk a few more steps." Steward Lu nodded his head in satisfaction and praised, "Mem, young man, you're not bad." Yang Fan smiled shyly at him, revealing 2 shallow dimples on her cheeks. "Thank you for your compliment. I'll go now." "All right, go ahead. It will be lunch soon. Come to the 5 Apricot Pavilion and have lunch with me." Yang Fan quickly bowed and said, "Manager Xia, I'll be there in a moment." Yang Fan bowed to Steward Lu and nodded to Ma Qiao, indicating that he understood the situation. Then he walked past them. Steward Lu narrowed his eyes as he looked at Yang Fan's back. He nodded his head approvingly and said, "This child is really not bad. He has a good temper, is handsome, and is diligent and capable. He's not like other youngsters with bad habits." Hearing Steward Lu praising his brother, Ma Qiao said proudly, I won't hide it from Steward Lou. In our workshop, most of the workers are sneaky and ruffian scoundrels. However, this Beta Persei is an exception. He moved here from the countryside and lives here alone. Yet he's not infected with bad habits. Usually, he's doted on by the elders in the workshop. Steward Lou, if there's a suitable daughter in your family, haha, Xiao Fan will definitely be a good husband. It turned out that because of Tin Ano's elopement, this Ma Chiao couldn't wait to promote Yang Fan to others as soon as he had the chance. Steward Lou smiled. He's a good child. Unfortunately, he's a bad person and has no parents or brothers to help him. I do have a little granddaughter, but if she marries this kind of person, won't she be poor as well? Steward Lou shook his head and sighed regretfully. He turned around and walked forward. Because there were many guards placed everywhere in the residence, Lang Zhong's residence had long broken the separation between the inner and outer residences. At this time, the wives of the family did not avoid guests. The barrier between men and women was not as serious as it was in later generations. So breaking the separation between the inner and outer residences was not a big deal. Compared to the front hall, the Yang family's rear residence had a much richer atmosphere of life. There was a small pavilion here, a clump of flowers and trees there, a winding corridor with a pond and emerald rockery. It appeared exceptionally elegant. Beside the pond, there was a small pavilion with 5 corners. Several officials of the Ministry of Justice were resting in the pavilion. Some of them were sitting with their legs crossed and boasting about their heroic deeds in arresting criminals and robbers. Some of them were looking around, and as long as they saw a servant girl's robe flutter through the rockery and wisteria, they would raise their eyebrows and give a frivolous whistle. Yang Fan carried the lunchbox and hurried into the pavilion. Placing the box on the table, he smiled and said, "Officials, it's time for lunch." Those who had been talking and looking around all gathered around. When they opened the lunchbox, the food was piping hot and the aroma assailed their nostrils, stirring their appetites. Although it was impossible to cook a few dishes and get a pot of wine for them, the food prepared for the officials of the Ministry of Justice was clearly of a higher grade than the food prepared for Marquis Wu and the workers. A minister of justice with a long, thin face and a green mark on his cheek rolled up a steamed cake with meat filling in his hand. He glanced at Yang Fan and curiously asked, "Why are all the servants in your mansion equipped with knives?" Yang Fan was vigilantly scanning the surroundings of the rear garden. Hearing the inquiry, he hurriedly smiled at the official and said, "You misunderstand. I am a worker of the Xiao Wen workshop. I was transferred to the Lang Zhong's residence to help guard the residence." The man couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of pie on the ground. He laughed and said, "I was wondering why the front yard was so noisy. So it turns out that people like you have been transferred here. What can people like you do?" His expression was full of disdain, but Yang Fan didn't seem to care. He still had a faint smile on his face and replied humbly, "If we are talking about catching thieves and arresting criminals, we, the workers, naturally can't compare to the officials. However, we can still do small things like night patrols and call for people." The official curled his lips in disdain and looked Yang Fan up and down. He said, "Fine, come over and spar with me, Wang will you? Let me see just how capable you are." Yang Fan was shocked and hurriedly waved his hand. "How can I do that? You are an official of the Ministry of Justice. How can a mere worker compare to you?" Wang Wu snorted and said, "It would be strange if you could. Come, I only have one hand, so I'm just trying." As Wang Wu said this, his right hand was still holding the pie. He took a big bite, and the meat juices flowed down the corner of his mouth. He only raised his left hand and walked towards Yang Fan step by step. Yang Fan retreated and said, "Officials, please stop. This is Lang Zhong's manor. How can we use force?" The other patrolmen of the Ministry of Justice saw this and started to jeer. "Why can't we spar? You little brat, you are a man. How can you be so spineless?" Someone laughed and said, "I see that he is so handsome and his eyes are gentle. He looks like a woman. Someone else said, haha, now that I mention it, I also think so. Most of the women in our Tang dynasty are fierce and bold. Look at him. Not only does he look like a woman, he looks like a docile and obedient Korean woman. Hey, I say, why don't you learn a dance from a Korean woman, or walk a few steps like a woman and shake her butt? Then there's no need to compete. Ha ha ha. The officials of the Ministry of Justice laughed impudently. If this was any other time, they would not dare to be so impudent in Yang Longjong's manner. But now was different. Yang Longjong's face was so hot that it was scarier than a ghost's. Both of his eyes were said to have been scalded blind. His career as an official had come to an end. This kind of the tea cools when the person leaves reaction was the first to show. No subtlety. On the other hand, officials, even if they no longer needed you, would not be so quick to act like the tea cools when the person leaves. At the very least, their enthusiasm on the surface would not diminish. All right. Then let's compete. Yang Fan had the image of a young man who cared about his face. After being ridiculed, his face turned red. He gathered his courage and forced himself to emphasize, "You said before, only use your left hand." Wang Wuliu nodded and laughed. "That's right. I only use my left hand and not my right. Haha, come. As he said this, he pretended to take a bite of the steamed pie with contempt. Yeah. Yang Fan used the black tiger steals the heart to strike Wang Wuliu's chest. From the looks of it, he had a bit of a kung fu stance. He must have trained with an amateur boxer for 3 to 5 days. His fist had just reached a foot in front of Wang Wuliu when the motionless Wang Wuliu's body suddenly exploded. He took a step forward and leaned to the side. His palm struck toward Yang Fan's chest. Yang Fan's black tiger steals the heart was full of openings. He was hit by Wang Wuliu's palm and was forced back 3 steps. Yang Fan had not yet stabilized his footing when Wang Wuliu shot forward like an arrow. His right foot stuck between Yang Fan's legs, and his left hand grabbed the front of Yang Fan's clothes. He twisted his left elbow and raised it with all his strength. He shouted, "Go!" Ah! Yang Fan's arms and legs flailed as he fell into the pond. With a bang, water splashed everywhere. The officials inside and outside the pavilion burst into laughter. What a good-for-nothing. This kind of trash can only be used as a decoration. Wang Wuliu took a bite of the steamed biscuit and proudly walked back to the pavilion. Yang Fan did not dare to climb ashore, so he swam to the other side of the pond. Unexpectedly, he used the posture of a dog paddle. The officials from the Ministry of Justice saw this and laughed even harder. Yang Fan used both his hands and feet to swim to the other side of the pond. He grabbed a rock and was about to climb up when he suddenly heard a clear and melodious child's voice. "Why did they throw you into the water?" Yang Fan raised his head and saw a pair of silk children's shoes on the rock, a pair of white cloth socks, and a child's skirt embroidered with beads. Because that person was squatting on the rock garden, one could vaguely see a pair of striped trousers underneath her skirt. Raising her head to look up, she saw a green silk embroidered shirt with small sleeves, with a clip-on collar against a pretty little face. Her hair was combed into 2 buns with the tips of her hair. It was a little girl with pink and jade-like makeup. This little girl was about 6 or 7 years old. She looked at him curiously with a pair of lacquered eyes. Because the place where the girl was standing was covered with jagged rocks, it blocked the view from the direction of the pavilion. Therefore, it was not easy to see her from the pavilion. "Oh, they were playing with me." Yang Fan answered randomly. He wiped the water off his face and rushed up the rock. The little girl squatted and moved back to make room for him. She wrinkled her nose and said, "You're lying. They were obviously bullying you." Yang Fan laughed and squatted on the rock, wringing the water off his clothes. He turned his head and asked, "Little girl, who are you?" The little girl said quietly, "This is my home. Who do you think I am?" Chapter 67. Oh, Yang Longjong's daughter? Yang Fan took a few glances at her. She had a small face that was as clear as a duck's egg. Her eyebrows were delicate, and her eyes were like dots of paint. This was a very beautiful and adorable girl. Thinking of Yang Mingxing's concave eyes and aquiline nose, which seemed to carry some Hu blood, Yang Fan couldn't help but think, I'm afraid those auntie's conjectures are not groundless. This little girl's appearance is really different from her father's. Yang Fan wrung the water off his clothes and asked, Then what are you doing here? The little girl said, Grandpa, spoken, father, was injured by bad people. I want to go see him, but Grandpa won't let me into his room. I'm very unhappy. Yang Fan comforted her. Maybe your father is afraid that his appearance will scare you. The little girl silently shook her head. She was so young, but her face was unexpectedly sad. Grandpa has not treated me well. He has not treated me well since I was young. Mother went to see him, but Grandpa also won't let her in. Actually, I rarely saw Grandpa since I was young. He was always busy with his own things, holding a pile of thick books and reading them with great interest. The little girl pursed her lips and suddenly lowered her voice, saying mysteriously, I heard people say that I'm not Grandpa's biological daughter. Yang Fan was stunned. He didn't know how to answer her. The little girl looked at him and sighed softly. Bored to death, she propped up her chin. Her pink cheeks were propped up by her small hands, making her look charmingly naive. Everyone is like this. They talk about you behind your back, but when you really want to ask them, they all laugh and don't want to say anything. Yang Fan looked at this girl who didn't seem very mature. Compared to her age, she seemed to be too mature. He asked softly, Your father has not treated you well, and other people say that you're not your father's biological daughter. Now that he is injured, are you worried about him? Will you hate the person who hurt him? Of course. The little girl's eyes flickered. She answered seriously, Whether Grandpa is my biological father or not, I was raised by him. If I don't worry about him, who should I worry about? The bad guy harmed Grandpa, so of course I have to hate that big bad guy. Yang Fan was silent for a moment. Then he nodded heavily and said, Yes, even if I didn't give birth to her, I still have the grace of raising her. As a person, kindness must be repaid. The grudge must be repaid. The little girl nodded her head vigorously and smiled sweetly at him. Although your ability isn't that great, your words are very correct. I'm Yang Xuelian, and you? Yang Fan smiled and replied softly, My surname is Yang. My name is Yang Fan. When Yang Fan returned to the 5-plum pavilion in the front residence, Ma Chiao was placing the dishes on the table. He was quite good at handling affairs. He coaxed steward Lu to be happy and accompanied him to work. The work was easy and the food was better than the other workers. Seeing Yang Fan's drenched appearance, Ma Chiao hurried over and asked in surprise, How long has it been? How did you end up like this? Yang Fan sighed and said, Alas! When I went to the back residence to deliver food, those officials from the Ministry of Justice saw that I was carrying a saber and insisted on competing with me in martial arts. As he said this, he took the padao from his waist and pulled it out of the scabbard. With a splash, a puddle of clear water appeared under his feet. Steward Lu was holding a pair of chopsticks and was about to pick some food when he heard this. He slammed his chopsticks on the table and said angrily, Humph! These villains know that my Ah Lang's power is gone. That's why they dare to be so presumptuous. They actually caused such trouble in my Yang residence. If it wasn't for Ah Lang needing to recuperate now, this old man would definitely. He paused and looked at Yang Fan, then sighed and said, Child, you're too honest. It's good that you don't cause trouble, but you can't let others bully you. Yang Fan smiled shyly and even scratched his head at the right time, looking like a charmingly naive country boy. Steward Lu glared at him resentfully and said, Child, you really make people distressed and angry at the same time. It's already late autumn and you're dripping wet like this. Won't you catch a cold? Did you bring a change of clothes? Go change before you eat. Yang Fan said, "This little one is young and strong. It won't be a problem." But Ma Chiao knew very well that he did not bring a change of clothes, so he said, "Let's go. I just happened to bring a change of clothes. Let's go back and change." Ma Chiao pulled Yang Fan back to the woodshed and took out his own change of clothes for him to change into. Although it was a little fat, it was still a good fit. When the two returned to 5 Plum Pavilion, Steward Lu was almost full. Seeing them return, he said, "Sit down and eat, it's going to get cold." Yang Fan and Ma Chiao thanked him and sat down on both sides of the table. Just as they picked up their chopsticks, a servant rushed in and reported, "Steward Lu, General Kai Dongqing of the Right Imperial Guard has come to visit Alang." "Oh." Steward Lu, who had just finished eating, hurriedly put down his chopsticks and stood up, saying, "I'll go welcome him. Quickly inform Alang." Steward Lu hurriedly wiped his hands, got up and walked out, muttering to himself, "Strange. There aren't any generals among the officials Alang usually has dealings with. But this general came as soon as he heard the news. It seems he is very familiar with Alang." Yang Fan's ears twitched slightly as he heard every single word that Steward Lu said. After a while, Steward Lu came back, smiling from ear to ear as he led a guest. Ma Chiao and Yang Fan were sitting in 5 Plum Pavilion eating. This pavilion had no windows and was transparent on all sides, so they could clearly see the situation on the road. Both of them looked curiously at the general. Although they lived in Luoyang, it was the first time they saw such a high-ranking official. Steward Lu bowed slightly as he led the general under the shade of the trees. There were 2 rows of elm trees stretching from the main hall to the front door. The 2 rows were perfectly straight, and in the middle there was a neat pavement paved with stone slabs. The shade was dense, and sunlight shone through the trees onto the pavement. Because of the gentle breeze, the branches danced in the air, casting shadows all over the ground. Yang Fan looked over, his gaze moving from bottom to top. The first thing that came into view was a thin-soled battle boot made of yellow ox hide. As the battle boot stepped on, a leaf that had not yet fallen to the ground was stepped on by him. When the boot was lifted again, the leaf had already been crushed into pieces. The battle boot was lifted and then put down again, creating a rhythmic sense of power. Yang Fan's pupils couldn't help but shrink slightly. His gaze continued to move up, quickly sweeping past the thick and sturdy body, landing directly on his face. This was a burly man with a red face, wearing a military officer's robe of the Fengchen Guards. His helmet was tucked under his ribs, his hair tied up, facing upwards from his forehead. His black hair tightly clung to his face, giving him a dignified aura without being angry. Steward Lu bowed slightly and made a gesture of invitation to the tall and sturdy man. The man turned slightly and stepped onto the road to the back of the residence. As he turned, under his thick black eyebrows, 2 sharp eyes swept across the pavilion. His gaze swept past Yang Fan and Ma Chiao without pausing for a moment. In the eyes of this lieutenant general of the Fengchen Guard, there was no difference between Yang Fan and Ma Chiao sitting in the 5 Plum Pavilion and the stone tables, stone benches, pavilion pillars, and bonsai that had swept past. When he turned to the back of the house, one could clearly see that the robe on his chest was stretched taut by his bulging muscles. When he swung his arm, the rivets on the leather wrist guards on his sleeves glowed with golden light under the sunlight. Such power! Ma Chiao couldn't help but sigh in admiration. Such a strong killing intent. Yang Fan silently added in his heart. All the guests that came to the lieutenant general's residence were people he suspected, especially the generals. What Steward Lu had said to himself earlier had already revealed a lot of information. In these years, the officials that Yang Mingxing had befriended were mostly civil officials. There were very few generals who interacted with him. This Lieutenant General Kai had never even paid a visit. But right after something had happened to Yang Mingxing, he had come, although he was the Lieutenant General of the Fengchen Guard and not the Longu Army. who knew if the lieutenant general of the Fengtian Guard today was the first officer of the Longwu army in the past. Yang Fan narrowed his eyes slightly. Clang, 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 the footsteps were sonorous. There were 4 other generals following behind Lieutenant General Kai. When Kai Dongqing turned to the corridor in the back of the residence, they happened to be walking side by side. These were 4 soldiers with 1,000 oxen. The Fengtian Guard had a total of 12,000 oxen. They were also high-ranking military officials, and there were 4 of them. The 4 people walked side by side. The one on the left had a sharp chin and a leopard's face, a stocky back and a bear's waist. The second had the arms of an ape and a long body, like an agile leopard. The third had a sharp chin and a protruding forehead, with slightly sunken cheeks. He looked lean, but his sword-like eyebrows slanted to his temples gave him a heroic air. The 4th person was slightly fatter than the other 3, but he didn't give off the slightest feeling of being bloated or slow. What was even more surprising was that when these 4 people raised their hands and moved their feet, they seemed to be one person. Looking at it from any angle, it was as if there were 3 shadows of one person. It was to the extent that every time their eyes moved, they would accurately land on the same spot. Since they were in the ranks, perhaps they had put in a lot of hard work to practice formations, but what they were displaying now was not just orderly ranks. Moreover, in this place, they didn't need to deliberately be orderly. Each of them was walking their own path and didn't deliberately coordinate with others. But no matter how they walked, no matter how fast or slow their steps were, they were like one person. It was to the extent that when they followed the path to the back of the residence, the people in the inner circle slowed down their steps, narrowed the distance between them, while the people in the outer circle took bigger steps and increased their speed. It was all so natural, without a trace of deliberate. It was like a meat screen, or perhaps an iron wall. If any one of them were taken out individually, they wouldn't be as awe-inspiring as Lieutenant General Kai Dongqing. But when the 4 of them walked together, even Kai Dongqing seemed to be inferior to them. This kind of seamless unity gave people a feeling that there was no way to attack. Yang Fan thought to himself, "These 4 people must have known each other for many years and are skilled in joint attacks." Chapter 68. Anyone who appeared in the Yang mansion was Yang Fan's imaginary enemy, not to mention these suspicious soldiers. As soon as he discovered that they could pose a threat to him, Yang Fan instinctively wanted to know their background, strengths, and weaknesses. Relying on his good relations with others, Yang Fan quickly found out the identity of these people from Steward Lu's mouth. The Minister General of the Imperial Guard, Kai Dongqing. The 4 iron-walled soldiers were Kai Dongqing's 4 great generals, Lu Kuei, Shen Jiahui, Wu Xiaodong, and Huang Qilin. They were his most important subordinates in the Right Imperial Guard. In Yang Mingxing's bedroom, Kai Dongqing was kneeling in front of the bed, his back straight, giving people the feeling that he was a javelin. Kai Dongqing stared at Yang Mingxing, whose facial features were difficult to distinguish, and said in a low voice, "You mean, this person is the fish that escaped the net from Xiaozhou's Peach Blossom Village in Lingnan?" "Yes." Kai Dongqing's eyes slowly lowered, and he said thoughtfully, "In that small village, there were altogether 11 families with the surnames Heilin: Xiahou, Yang, Shen, Li, Zhao, Wang, Qiu, Feng, Feng, and Han. Most of them were scholars, and I have never heard of any martial arts experts among them. If they had such high level of ability, why didn't they make any moves back then?" Yang Mingxing said gloomily, "At that time, no one went to exterminate their entire family. Why would they make any moves?" Kai Dongqing's brows furrowed slightly. Even though they had a common secret because of the major case they had worked together in the past and also relied on the secret, their official careers had been smooth sailing. Now, Yang Mingxing had become an influential figure in the Ministry of Justice's Judicial Division, and he had even been promoted to the Right Imperial Guard Commander, but he and Yang Mingxing really didn't have much contact. Scholars and martial artists were like water and oil. There were really not many who could mix together. What he remembered was Yang Mingxing's temperament in the past. He didn't know if Yang Mingxing's temper had grown over the years, or if it was because of his disability that his temperament had changed so much. In short, listening to him speak made people feel uncomfortable. But looking at Yang Mingxing's inhuman and ghostly appearance, Kai Dongqing didn't want to bicker with him anymore. Kai Dongqing carefully thought for a moment, then said, "It's really impossible to find out the other party's identity just by relying on an aged voice. There's only a glimmer of hope if we can confirm the other party's identity." Yang Mingxing said, "These 11 families were banished to Lingnan, along with their families, troops, and servants. They lived on the mountain for more than 10 years, growing old, getting sick, and dying. We don't know how many of them survived. The only thing I can be sure of is that this person is no longer young. At that time, he was at least middle-aged." Kai Dongqing said coldly, "This clue is as good as none. Perhaps the key to finding out his identity is, why did he only come to us now?" Yang Mingxing said, "Maybe he just found out about us." Kai Dongqing sneered, "Find out? How? How can he find out about us?" Yang Mingxing sat quietly, not saying a word. Kai Dongqing looked at the face that was completely wrapped in white cloth. Suddenly, he thought of something, and his face changed color. After half a day, he laughed and said, "Yang Langzhong, don't tell me you are suspecting that person? That's impossible. How could it be? If that person wanted to kill us, he only needs to move his mind and will be turned into ashes and smoke. Why would he need to go through all this trouble?" Kai Dongqing's expression was very uneasy. His aura was like an invincible sharp sword. No one can touch its edge. But right now he was unusually frightened. So much so that when he asked Yang Mingxing without waiting for his reply, he hastily rejected this possibility. His heart was extremely uneasy. Yang Mingxing slowly said, "What are you thinking? Of course I won't suspect that person. If it was an assassin sent by that person, the assassin could have just killed me. Why would he need to torture me like this?" Kai Dongqing breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that as long as it was not that person, he no longer had any fear. That invincible, sharp aura once again shone. "Then what are you thinking?" Yang Mingxing said, "I'm thinking he should be watching me right now. He's hiding somewhere very close to me, watching everyone who approaches me." As Yang Mingxing said this, he turned his head to look left and right, even though he could not see anything. Perhaps, to find out the key to him, we don't need any clues at all. We just need to sit here and quietly wait for him. He will definitely come again. Kai Dongqing frowned at first, then he suddenly understood. He suddenly stood up, surprised and angry. "You mean he deliberately let you go? He thought you were bait to lure me out? As for you, you did as he wished and brought me here? Don't be noisy." Yang Mingxing slightly tilted his head, as if he was listening to something. After a moment of silence, he straightened his posture and said to Kai Dongqing, "General Kai, I, Yang, am not a person without responsibility. I did not reveal your identity to him. When I thought I would definitely die, he did not kill me. But if he wanted to kill me, it would be very easy. I thought for a long time before I understood. He wanted to use me as bait to find other enemies. My life is obviously not enough to offset his hatred. Haha, Yang is now a cripple. I don't want to think about anything else. My only wish is to kill him. So," he slowly raised his head, his pitch-black nostrils like eyes staring at Kai Dongqing. He fervently roared, "Lure him to kill you, you kill him." At night, Yang Langzhong's residence was very peaceful. At least, on the surface, it seemed very peaceful. From this, one could see the vastness of the minister's residence. There were so many servants, guards, and Marquis Wu as well as patrolmen. Although they had to take 3 shifts a day, so only a third of them were active at night, when they spread out, it still looked the same as usual. It was still quiet and spacious, as if it had to be such a spacious residence. It was foggy at night, and the autumn mist curled up in spirals, so the patrolling guards were even more cautious. They were afraid that the audacious assassin who dared to assassinate the disciplinary officer would suddenly appear out of the night fog and stab them with his blade. Therefore, their steps were very careful, their backs slightly bent, and they cautiously looked around, paying attention to any movement. Yong Fan, like the other night patrolmen, walked cautiously, a saber at his waist and a gong in his hand. His steps were as light as a cat's, afraid that someone would hear him. Shoo, shoo, shoo. Yong Fan followed the sound and saw Ma Chiao, wearing a straw hat woven from tree branches, poking his head out from behind a clump of flowers and grass and waving at him. Yong Fan walked over. Ma Chiao whispered, "Don't keep wandering around like that. Be careful if you really run into that fiend. Just deal with him casually. When there's no one around, slack off and find a place to dawdle." Yong Fan's heart warmed. He nodded and said, "I know. You should be careful too." I know someone's coming." Ma Chiao answered and squatted down with a whoosh. Yong Fan turned to walk down the road. Two officials from the Ministry of Justice were walking side by side. They seemed to be walking casually, but their eyes were sweeping around, taking in everything in their surroundings. Their hands were tightly gripping the hilts of their sabers. Yong Fan stood by the side of the road, waiting for the two officials to pass before continuing on the road. The door to the first floor of the study in the rear courtyard was wide open. Light flowed out from the room and shone on the steps 3 feet away from the door. There was a stool placed at the place where Muninger used to brew tea. A large, stocky man was sitting on the stool, wiping his saber under the light. The saber was a 1,000-bull saber, as bright as autumn water. The large man used a deerskin rag to wipe it over and over again. Sometimes he would raise it and squint his eyes, then he would continue wiping the non-existent dirt. He cherished this saber very much. The 1,000-bull saber could cut 1,000 bulls, so it was naturally a first-class saber. Kai Dong Cheng's 4 iron wall experts were led by him. His name was Lu Kuei. Lu Kuei did not know why Minister Kai had brought them to the Yang residence. Moreover, he had asked the 4 brothers to stay the night in the residence and assist Minister Lu in capturing the assassins. They were soldiers, while Yang Longzhong was a civil official. Even if Minister Lu and Yang Longzhong had a close personal relationship, it was extremely inappropriate for him to transfer a military officer to do the work of a patrolling official. However, Lu Kuei had no complaints. Minister Kai was his superior and also his big brother. These brothers had been in the army for so many years. They had charged and broken through enemy lines together, killed enemies together, and had long since forged a deep friendship. They were like brothers. He was good at killing people, but he was not good at dealing with people. He was even less skilled at welcoming and socializing in the official circles. Now he was able to stand out among the Fengqin guards and become a 1,000-bull soldier. Lu Kuei was very clear on this point. The 12,000 oxen of the Fengqin guards did not only rely on their ability to bathe in blood on the battlefield. Among them, some relied on family connections, some relied on flattery. If it was not for Kai Longjiang's discerning eyes, after 20 years of military life, he might still only be a platoon leader, at most a lieutenant. He knew that everything he had today was thanks to Kai Lang General, so he never questioned any of Kai Lang General's decisions. Since Kai Lang General had given them the task of guarding the courtyard, then he had to do this task well. The 4 brothers each guarded the 4 corners of Yang Lang's room, each occupying a direction in the east, south, west, and north direction. With them here, one man could hold the pass against 10,000 enemies. The sound of footsteps came from the stairs. Lu Kuei's hand that was wiping his saber stopped, and he raised his eyes to look at the steps. A youth in blue clothes and a small had held a gong under his ribs and a wooden mallet hooked on his pinky finger as he unhurriedly walked up the steps. Lu Kuei had seen him before. He was one of the 10 sentries of the inner compound. He did not remember his name, but he had some impression of this person's appearance. The youth seemed not to have thought that there would be people here. With a shocked expression, he paced back and forth and wanted to retreat. Lu Kuei said in a low voice, "What is it?" The youth hesitated and said embarrassedly, "This lowly one wanted to find some water to drink. I didn't expect General to be stationed here." Although a 1,000 bull soldier was a high-ranking military official, he was not a general. The youth's honorific made Lu Kuei feel very comfortable. So while his face was still tense, his tone softened. "The water is over there. Pour it yourself." The youth let out a breath and hurriedly bowed. "Many thanks, General. Many thanks, General." The youth quietly entered the room and walked to a low table on the side. Chapter 69. Lu Kuei held a knife in one hand and mechanically wiped the blood with a deerskin rag. At the same time, he coldly glanced at the youngster's movements. The youngster walked to the side of the table and gently put down the wooden mallet. Then he placed the gong on the table to prevent it from making a sound. There was a pot of water and a plate of upside-down cups on the table. Next to it, there was an opened cup with half a cup of water inside. That was the cup that Lu Kuei had just used. The youngster gently turned over a cup and filled it with water. Then he filled Lu Kuei's cup to the brim. The indifference in Lu Kuei's eyes decreased slightly. This is a young man who knows the rules. Lu Kuei prided himself on being a person who was slow in speech but quick in action. Therefore, he was especially concerned about other people's actions. This little servant was already much more pleasing to the eye. After the youngster finished drinking, he gently put down the cup and bowed to Lu Kuei. He smiled and said, "Thank you, General. I will go on patrol now." Lu Kuei grunted and wiped his eyelids. He lightly said, "The yamen has arranged for you people to keep watch at night. This is simply sending you to your death. Be careful." Lu Kuei had always been clumsy with words. He did not care about his superiors or colleagues. But now he specially gave a word of advice to a little servant whose status was worlds apart from his. This was the first time he had done this. The youngster's smile had a very special affinity. It was easy for people to have a good impression of him. The youngster's smile became even brighter. "Thank you, General, for your concern. Yang Longzhong was able to invite such a powerful person to guard the residence. Presumably, that thief will not dare to come again. What is there for me to be afraid of?" A trace of a smile appeared in Lu Kuei's eyes. "What do you know? Since that person dared to injure Yang Longzhong to that state, it is clear that there is an irreconcilable hatred between them. Why would you be afraid of someone catching him? You should be careful. If you really meet that person, Humph, you better pray for your own good." The youngster thought for a moment and blushed. "That's right. General's might is certainly frightening. But that person has a blood feud with Yang Longzhong. Presumably he will not give up. I should be more careful. Thank you, General, for your reminder." "Oh, wait." Lu Kuei stopped wiping his saber, raised his head, and asked, "Do you know what enmity that person has with Yang Longzhong?" Speaking of which, Lu Kuei still didn't know who had hurt Yang Longzhong and why. Everyone was curious. Hearing the sentence, he couldn't help but ask. The young man said with some surprise, "I heard from the steward of the mansion that when the thief snuck into the mansion, he told Yang Longzhong that he came because of the Xiaozhou murder case in the second year of Yongchen. So he has an irreconcilable enmity with Yang Longzhong. General was invited here by Yang Longzhong. Yet you don't know the identity of that bandit? Second year of Yongchen. Xiaozhou bloody case." Lu Kuei lowered his head and thought for a moment. His expression suddenly changed. He suddenly raised his head and said, "That person is Xiaozhou's peach garden." As soon as Lu Kuei raised his head, his eyes suddenly opened wide because he saw the youth that was originally standing 3 m away suddenly appear before him. And the youth's fingers were like beaks that swiftly and violently stabbed towards his throat. "You dare!" Lu Kuei shouted angrily and raised the saber in his hand. The youth quickly retreated and suddenly stood 3 m away. He was still in the same place as before, as if he had never moved from that position. As quiet as a virgin, as fast as a rabbit, Lu Kuei waved the snow-white 1,000 bull saber in his hand in the air, but the person under the saber was already gone. Lu Kuei swung the saber in the air and wanted to stand up in shock and anger, but he suddenly felt as if all the strength in his body had been sucked out. His legs had no strength at all. He wanted to open his mouth and shout, but his mouth was wide open and not a single word came out. His throat gurgled a few times, and blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. He was still holding the saber in his hand, but his steel-like arms suddenly softened. The originally bright and clean steel saber fell to the ground with a clang and was stained with a bit of dirt. The youth's fingers were like a beak, and with lightning speed he pointed at Lu Kuei's throat and quickly retreated before Lu Kuei could swing the saber again. Lu Kuei's eyes were wide open in anger, and his eyes seemed to be about to pop out of their sockets. He used all the strength in his body, but still couldn't spit out a single word, because his throat had been smashed by the youth's beak, and his vocal cords had been pierced into minced meat. He couldn't make any sound at all. Lu Kuei's face was as red as chicken blood. He barely managed to spit out a few indecipherable syllables, and his body began to shake. The youth seemed to know what he wanted to say. He walked over and gently walked in front of Lu Kuei, gently bent down, picked up the 1,000-bull saber, straightened his back, looked into Lu Kuei's eyes, and softly asked, "Since you know that there is a peach blossom village in Shaozhou, don't you know why I made a move?" Lu Kuei's throat emitted a low whining sound. It was the sound of a wave of qi passing through his throat, but he still couldn't speak. The youth didn't hesitate. He suddenly raised the saber and waved it in the air, creating a halo. The white halo instantly turned red. The last words Lu Kuei heard were, "147 ghosts of the Peach Blossom Village are waiting for you. Please be on your way." A head with a leopard's jaw and an angry red face flew into the air. The saber was indeed a good saber. After the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, a patrolling shopkeeper found Lu Kuei's body. This shopkeeper had a whistle hanging around his neck, but he only needed to scream to complete the summoning mission. When many people rushed over in response, they saw Lu Kuei sitting upright on the stool, becoming the king who stood shoulder to shoulder. His neck was empty, and the head had rolled behind a pillar to the side. Blood splattered all over the ground. Judging from the sputtering blood, Lu Kuei wasn't placed back on his seat after his death. Instead, he was beheaded while he was sitting on his seat. Moreover, the person used Lu Kuei's own saber. What did that person do to achieve such an effect? Following Lu Kuei's death, the Yang mansion was in an uproar. Several maids who heard the commotion broke into the study, only to vomit after witnessing the bloody scene. The patrol officers all had gloomy expressions on their faces, as if someone owed them 300 coins. Fengchen Imperial Guard Lieutenant Kai Dongqing led Shen Jiehui, Wu Xiaodong, and Huang Qilin into the study and never came out again. In order to prevent the villains from luring the tiger away from the mountain, Yang Mingxing was also carried in by them. The sorrowful and indignant cries of Shen Jiehui and the other two could be heard faintly from the study, interrupting the whispers of the Marquis Wu's shopkeepers. The whole courtyard was silent, and only the indistinct cries of grief could be heard, startling the crows that were resting on the branches and circling in the night sky. The faces of the Marquis Wu's shopkeepers were not very good. The intruder was able to sneak into the study under such tight circumstances and take Lu Kuei's head without the slightest resistance. What kind of terrifying person was this? The martial marquis who were in charge of patrolling the streets secretly rejoiced and felt a lingering fear. Even the sentry posts that were hidden in the dark, when they thought that the assassin might have walked past them without them noticing at all, they couldn't help but feel their hair stand on end. Whether it was the shopkeepers or Marquis Wu's, none of them had the awareness to catch this kind of fugitive. The Marquis Wu's received a meager salary and usually only managed matters such as petty theft, swindling, and fire prevention. The shopkeepers, as their supplement, at most dealt with small matters such as neighborhood disputes and street fights. They had never dealt with such a big case. This was a murder case, and the culprit had even killed the high officials of the Tang dynasty's Ministry of Justice and the Imperial Guard, Qianyobei's, without blinking an eye. This kind of fugitive had such extraordinary and terrifying martial arts. Who would be willing to send them to their deaths? They stood there silently, not because they were mourning Lu Qianwei's death, but because they thought that the assassin's target was Yang Longzhong. As long as Yang Longzhong didn't die, the assassin would definitely come again. If they were not careful, they would be killed like chickens. Of course, Yang Fan's face was also pale, and his face was full of fear. Even if you observed carefully, you wouldn't be able to find the slightest abnormality in his expression. Moreover, no one was paying attention to their expressions right now, because no one thought that the assassin was among them. Yang Fan discovered that the 4 Qianyobei's were experts in joint attacks, so he decided that he had to get rid of one of them first. His great Shifu had once told him that when well-trained soldiers joined hands to attack together, they had a tacit understanding of when to advance and when to retreat. This way, they could multiply the strength of each person. When they joined hands to attack together, the power they could unleash would be several times or even 10 times that of these individual soldiers combined. These 4 Qianyobei's were obviously skilled in martial arts. Yang Fan didn't know how much power they could unleash when they joined hands to attack together, and he didn't want to waste his energy to find out. What he wanted to do, he had to be cautious at every step, and there was no need to take those risks. Since he could use his secret identity to kill one of them and achieve his goal, then it was fine. These 4 people's joint attacks might have been practiced for a few years, or even 10 or 20 years. The tacit understanding between them made them seem like one person. Killing one of them would destroy this tacit understanding, because these 4 people were used to attacking and defending each other and cooperating with each other. Once one of them was killed, the remaining 3 would suddenly change their familiar attacking method. They might not even be as good as the 3 people who were trying to cooperate for the first time. This was tantamount to completely destroying the possibility of them joining hands to attack together. After he entered the library, he exchanged a few words with Lu Kuei just to confirm whether Lu Kuei was also one of the participants in the Xiaozhou bloody case. Of course, regardless of whether Lu Kuei was or not, since he had already stepped into this vortex, he must die. Lu Kuei had only said half a sentence. Although he had only said half a sentence, the change in his expression, the tone of his voice, and the fact that he had blurted out the name of the Peach Blossom Village all proved that he was a participant in the Huan Shan Village massacre, or at least an insider. If Lu Kuei was like this, then what about the other 3 people of the Iron Wall? What about Kai Dongqing, the commander of the Fengqin Guards? Chapter 70. Steward Old Lu walked out of the study with a heavy expression on his face. A few stewards immediately went up to him and asked him a few questions in a low voice. Steward Lu shook his head and said in a deep voice, "All right, don't ask any more. This place is already messy enough. Don't add to the mess. Hurry up and settle everyone down." Everyone returned to their respective positions and performed their duties. Old Luo, early tomorrow morning, bring some men to buy some things and prepare for Liu Bei's funeral. That steward Luo stared at him and said, "What? Is this appropriate? A member of the Fengqin Guards has died, and he wants to hold a funeral in our residence? How unlucky!" Old Lu reprimanded. "Liu Bei's hometown is thousands of miles away, and he died for our Alang. If he doesn't hold it here, where else can he hold it?" After he finished speaking, he turned back to look at the study. Seeing that no one seemed to have heard him, he hurriedly walked down the steps and pulled old Luo to the side. In a low voice, he said, "You don't think it's unlucky. That flying bandit is obviously coming for our master. We still have to rely on these soldiers to block the disaster for us. That middle commander Kai Dongqing and the other 3,000 oxen guards have been friends with Lu Kuei for more than 20 years. Even if we don't give them face, we still have to give them face. This matter was approved by Ya Lang, so you have to handle it seriously and solemnly. Don't let anyone find fault with us." Old Luo said, "So that's how it is. I understand. Steward, don't worry. I, old Luo, will definitely handle this matter well. Friends of more than 20 years, huh? When he heard this, a trace of coldness flashed across Yang Fan's eyes. Early the next morning, the news of the flying bandit entering the Yang residence again and stealing Liu Bei's head spread like wildfire. By noon, the news had spread throughout the entire Luoyang. Through word of mouth and layer upon layer of embellishment, this assassin who had entered the Yang residence at night and killed Lu Kuei of the Imperial Guard Qianyou had already become legendary. It was said that this assassin had cultivated a flying sword that could kill people from 1,000 miles away. It was said that he had the ability to fly in the sky and burrow into the ground. It was said that he could take the head of a general from 1,000,000 soldiers. Inside the Yang mansion, a funeral was being solemnly arranged for Lu Kuei. The small 2-story building in the study room had been turned into a mourning hall. In the main hall on the first floor, there was an incense burner offering 3 animals seasonal fruits, incense burners, wax tables, and so on. In front of the incense burner, there was a brazier, and gold and silver candles were burning, causing the originally elegant building to be filled with smoke. Lu Kuei's body was sewn up by old Luo, and old Luo paid a large sum of money to make it whole. Every needle and thread. The body was sewn in front of the coffin, and the coffin was Lu. In fact, Yang Longzhong did not need to do this to invite Kai Dongqing. After he was disfigured and blinded, his mind was in a mess. He was no longer as shrewd and calm as he used to be. Lu Kuei had died here, and the murder would obviously come again. Even if he rushed out, Kai Dongqing, Xin Jiahui, and the others would not leave. They were like brothers to Lu Kuei. How could they not avenge him? Yang Fan was still doing night watch duty and doing odd jobs during the day. When the morning hall was set up, he was busy inside. Kai Dongqing and the 3 Xin brothers stood in front of Lu Kuei's memorial tablet and swore that they would cut the murder into 1,000 pieces to avenge their brother. But how could they have imagined that the murderer was right next to them? In the afternoon, a large number of officials from the Ministry of Justice rushed to the Yang mansion. The servants of Marquis Wu's workshop and the Yang mansion were all herded to the side courtyard. From the main entrance of the Yang mansion through the front hall to the study at the back of the mansion, there was a sentry every 5 steps and a sentry every 10 steps. The study was also surrounded by the officials from the Ministry of Justice. Looking at the situation, it was obvious that an important person was coming. Unfortunately, even old Luo, who was the second steward, did not know who it was. Even he, who was in charge of the funeral, was chased out of the study. The scenery in the backyard of the Yang mansion was very beautiful. Although the gardens in the early Tang dynasty were not very exquisite, and there were not too many man-made decorations, and there were not too many cultural landscapes, it was still full of wild interest. The servants of Marquis Wu's workshop and the servants of the Yang mansion, who were herded to the side courtyard, knew that an important person was coming. No one dared to move around, and the courtyard was especially quiet. Ma Qiao took the opportunity to go home, because there was an important person coming, and they were temporarily not needed. Ma Qiao asked Steward Lu for leave, and wanted to go back to see his mother. Ma Qiao's filial piety was famous in the Xiaowen workshop, and Steward Lu also knew the details. People at that time especially cared about the word filial piety. Anyway, the Yang mansion temporarily did not need to assign him any tasks, so Steward Lu readily agreed. In the autumn garden, there was a faint sense of desolation. Yang Fan walked alone in the forest, looking around, as if it was his first time in a rich family and everything was new. In fact, he was familiarizing himself with the surroundings. It was obvious that after Lu Kuei was killed, the security in the mansion would be tighter, and the chances of a sneak attack would decrease. The more familiar he was with the environment in the mansion, the more advantageous it would be for him to act. Yang Fan was looking around, pretending to admire the scenery and memorizing the paths, trees, rockery, and flowers in the courtyard. Suddenly, a young and tender voice called out, "Hey!" Yang Fan looked in the direction of the voice and saw a street lamp in the grass by the side of the road. The Yang family's young Miss, Shuelian, was standing next to the lamp. The lamp was as tall as an adult's shoulder and was shaped like a stone shrine. The roof was tiled, and there were holes on all 6 sides, and it was covered with a fine copper net. This road led to the study and the bedroom in the back courtyard. Because Yang Longzhong often worked late into the night in the study, he often walked on this road, so there were lamps on both sides of the road. Yang Fan walked over, bent down, and asked with a smile, "Little miss, what are you doing here?" Yang Shuelian said, "There is an important official coming to the house." So mother accompanied father to the study to wait. "I was very bored by myself, so I came here to catch crickets." "Oh, did you catch them?" "I caught them." Yang Shuelian smiled happily and turned around to point at the lamp, saying, "Look, I've already caught 5, and they're all locked up here." Yang Shuelian carefully opened the small net door of the lamp, and a cricket wanted to run out. She quickly closed the small door and said with a smile, "Want to run? It won't be that easy." Yang Fan said with a smile, "Little miss is amazing, to be able to catch so many at once." "Ai, it's not that many. Nowadays, there are fewer and fewer crickets, and in a few days, there won't be any left. Autumn is the most annoying, and the crickets in the courtyard will become less and less. In the end, you can only hear one cricket calling, and one day it will suddenly stop." Yang Shuelian lifted her skirt and walked out of the grass. She looked at Yang Fan with a pair of big black and white eyes, and said with some sadness, "Say, after the weather turns cold, where do you think the crickets will go? Did they die?" This Yang Fan didn't know how to answer, and thought for a moment, then said, "Maybe because it's too cold, so they hid in the cave. If the crickets are all dead, how can there be crickets next year?" Yang Shuelian tilted her head and thought for a moment. She became happy and said with joy, "Yes, you're right, they must have run home to hide." Yang Fan looked at her and couldn't help but ask, "Do you often catch crickets in the courtyard alone?" Yang Shuelian nodded and said, "Yes. Father doesn't like me, and mother always plays cards and gambles with others. She doesn't accompany me, so I played alone in the courtyard since I was a child. I like to catch crickets sometimes." She looked back at the crickets that were calling in the lamp and sighed like a little adult and said, "Sometimes I feel that I'm actually the same as them. We're all locked in the same cage. But at least they have a companion." Yang Fan frowned and asked, "Does your mother often play cards?" Yang Shuelian said, "She doesn't always play cards. Sometimes she flips money, plays doubles, throws dice." Yang Fan was silent. Little Shuelian glanced at him and asked, "What are you strolling around here by yourself?" Yang Fan said, "Oh, isn't it because a high-ranking official has come to your family? I have nothing to do right now, so I can only walk around. Right, do you know who has come, and why is there such a large commotion?" Yang Shuelian said, "I know. I heard from my mother that the person who has come is my father's immediate superior, Assistant Minister Zhou of the Ministry of Justice. My mother said that Assistant Minister Zhou is very powerful. Even though he is just an assistant minister right now, even the minister has to listen to him. So many major matters have happened in my family, and Assistant Minister Zhou is very unhappy. Today he came to take a look and personally made arrangements to catch the thief. This Assistant Minister Zhou is so powerful, he will definitely be able to catch that bad person." Yang Fan was about to speak when Steward Lu's figure appeared on the little path. When he saw Yang Shuelian, he called out, "Miss, what are you doing here? A noble person has come to the Fu today. Miss, do not run around. Foreign is looking for you. Miss, quickly go to the reception hall and wait for that noble guest." Yang Fan bowed and said, "Steward Lu." Steward Lu watched as Yang Shuelian ran away and then turned to look at Yang Fan. He warned, "It is best if you do not randomly strike up a conversation with Mississippi, even though Miss is still a young girl. But it is best if you stay far away from her. Our Yang family has many rules, and the rules that Ah Lang has set for the women in the family have always Chapter 71. At this point, Steward Lu sighed softly and said sourly, "I'm afraid Ah Lang won't be so strict with me in the future." He waved his hand disinterestedly and said, "You may go. Stay in the side courtyard and don't wander around." "Yes, Steward Lu, I'll go back first." Yang Fan smiled respectfully and turned to leave. Zhou Xing? Yang Fan thought about this person as he walked. After a brief analysis, he shook his head and denied the possibility that Zhou Xing had anything to do with him. In the second year of Yongchen, when the Shazhou murder case happened, Zhou Xing was still a county magistrate in the north. It was only in recent years, when Empress Wu's authority grew and she was expected to remove Li Tang's order and change the system, that she began to use ruthless officials to remove the obstacles to her seizing power. Zhou Xing won Empress Wu's favor because of his ruthless style of handling cases. That was how he rose to the top and became a high-ranking official in the Ministry of Justice. It was impossible for Zhou Xing to have anything to do with what happened back then. Zhou Xing was now the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, the de facto leader. Whether it was from the perspective of caring for his subordinates or from the perspective of such a major case in Luoyang, it was normal for him to personally inquire about his subordinates' affairs. He had already found out that, although Cai Dongqing was now the commander of the Left Imperial Guard and an illustrious general with great power, he was once a commander of the Dragon Guard. There was an 80 to 90% chance that he was the perpetrator of the Shazhou murder case. Injuring Yang Mingxing had lured Cai Dongqing out, but Cai Dongqing was also a lackey. The mastermind had yet to show himself. It seemed that if he wanted him to show himself, he would have to take down Cai Dongqing and his 4 Vajras first. Only then would he be able to force the mastermind to show himself. Yang Fan pondered as he returned to the side courtyard. That day, Yang Mingxing blurted out a name, Heilun Minji. Yang Fan had already found out that Heilun Minji was Wu Zetian's nephew. His mother was Wu Zetian's elder sister, who was once favored by Gaozong Li Ji and was given the title of Lady of Han. His sister, Heilun, was also favored by Li Ji and was given the title of Lady of Wei. As for Heilun Minji himself, after Wu Zetian exiled his 2 older brothers, he changed his surname to Wu and became the heir of Wu Zetian's father, Wu Shiyan. He was given the title of Duke of Zhou and could be said to be extremely wealthy. However, later on, Wu Zetian accused Heilun Min of making peace with her maternal grandmother, Lady Yang, embezzling public funds for personal gain, committing adultery with the crown prince's wife, Lady Yang, and many other crimes. She had her changed back to her original surname and was exiled to Lingnan. Heilun Minji's legendary life. Yang Fan couldn't think of any connection between Heilun Minji and the small village in Shaozhou. It was said that Heilun Minji was a wanton and unrestrained person, dissolute and lustful. However, he was handsome and talented. Not only that, he was also very knowledgeable. In addition to his illustrious family background and status, he had many friends in the royal court. Later on, these people were all implicated by him and were all demoted. Yang Fan suspected that the Peach Blossom Village that was suddenly built was probably used to settle the officials who were implicated by Heilun Minji and were demoted. The 11 families in the village were the officials who were implicated in the past. However, the small village was built 1 year after Heilun Minji's suicide, but the massacre happened 11 years later. This was a bit strange. If the villagers who suddenly appeared in this small mountain village were the officials and their families who were implicated by Heilun Minji, and if the court wanted to eradicate these people, there was no need to wait for so many years, and there was no need to use the plague as an excuse to cover it up. Moreover, during the Shaizhou bloody case, Heilun Minji had already turned into a pile of dirt. The court and the common people had long forgotten such a person. How could it be possible that more than 10 years later, Heilun Minji would suddenly kill those who were implicated by him? Judging from their secretive actions and the people they used to cover up their identities and whereabouts, it couldn't be the work of the court. Yang Mingsheng was the perpetrator of the Shaozhou massacre. From what Yang Mingsheng blurted out, it could be proved that the massacre of the village must have a great relationship with Heilin Minji. This was certain. The question was, what was in the mountain village? What secret did these villagers have that someone would use such an inhumane act of slaughtering an entire village to solve the problem? Perhaps only by clarifying this problem could he find the real culprit behind the scenes. Yang Fan thought for a long time, but he really couldn't think of any other way. It seemed that he could only use killing as bait to alarm the culprit behind the scenes. One of Kai Dongqing's 4 great Vajras was already gone. Even if the remaining 3 joined forces, it would be difficult for them to display their combined strength. Yang Fan planned to eradicate the 4 great Vajras one by one, and then finally kill Kai Dongqing. At that time, the frightened Yang Mingsheng would definitely ask for help from the real culprit behind the scenes. The morning hall had been set up for 3 days. Kai Dongqing's 3 valiant generals had been guarding the morning hall for 3 days, and the entire Yang residence had been on high alert for 3 days. Everyone had been tired and exhausted, but the mysterious assassin had never appeared again. In this world, one could be a thief for 1,000 days, but there was no way to guard against a thief for 1,000 days. Such intense defensive measures couldn't be maintained for long. Not to mention Marquis Wu and the workshop attendants. Even the officials of the Ministry of Justice and the patrolmen of Luoyang Prefecture were full of complaints after 3 days. If this went on before the assassin came to kill them, everyone would collapse. Kai Dongqing and Yang Mingsheng also knew that this couldn't go on. The 2 of them discussed for a while and had no choice but to restore the system of patrolling the night. Everyone took turns to keep watch at night so that they could all rest. That night, it was still Yang Fan's first patrol. According to the rule of 3 shifts, they had to take turns every 8 hours. In other words, Yang Fan had to keep watch from nightfall until dawn, a total of 8 hours. Then he had to rest for 16 hours. Shu shu shu. When Yang Fan walked past a thicket, Ma Qiao came out again. He had a straw hat on his head and was waving at him. Yang Fan walked over and said with a smile, "Brother Qiao, you really hid well." Ma Qiao pulled him under a tree and scolded, "You're silly. Why are you working so hard, walking back and forth? If the assassin comes in and sees you, he'll kill you with 1 blow. At most, the Langzhong residents will give you a coffin." Yang Fan naturally understood Ma Qiao's good intentions, but he couldn't just walk back and forth. Others could slack off, but he couldn't. He was looking for an opportunity to strike, but the security in the residence was obviously much tighter than before. It was easy for him to kill someone, but it was difficult to do so without leaving any traces. Seeing that Yang Fan only smiled shyly, Ma Qiao glared at him in exasperation and said helplessly, You're so honest." As he said this, Ma Qiao reached into his bosom and took out something, handing it to Yang Fan. The object was heavy in his hand. It was a curved piece of iron. Yang Fan asked curiously, "What is this?" As Ma Qiao untied his belt, he said, "This is the base of a pot. My family has a pot that leaked, and I originally planned to use it as a supplement. But when my mother heard about what happened in the Yang residence, she was worried and broke the pot in half." As Ma Qiao said this, he pulled out another piece of metal from his waist and handed it to Yang Fan, saying, "Here, keep this in your bosom. There's one on your chest and one on your back. If it's really, it might be of some use." Yang Fan hurriedly declined. "No, if I use it, what about you? This is what Annie prepared for you. Take it back quickly." Ma Qiao said, "Hey, I'm lying here. What are you worried about? Besides, I have many brothers at home. If something really happens, it's fine. In a while, I'll find a more secluded place to lie down and sleep. It doesn't matter if the assassin comes or not. I won't get up no matter what, and I won't be stupid enough to shout and scream. What can happen?" Ma Qiao fastened his belt and burrowed into the bushes. He worriedly poked his head out and said, "Don't be too stubborn. If you can slack off, then slack off." Even if the steward catches you, at most he'll scold you. What else can he do? It's not worth risking your life. Hey, I got it. Although Yang Fan didn't need this armor, he still felt warm in his heart. In front of Ma Chiao, he stuffed the 2 pieces of metal into his clothes and left. In fact, carrying these 2 things would greatly affect his skills, so after leaving Ma Chiao's line of sight, he wandered to the place where he met Miss Shuilian last time. Looking around and making sure there was no one around, he took out the metal pieces and stuffed them into the place where Miss Yang Shuilian, his big brother. You, what are you doing here? Yang Fan kicked the metal pieces into the bushes. Just as he was about to fasten his belt, a cold voice came from not far away. Yang Fan was secretly shocked. This person could actually hide from his ears, and his footsteps were very light. Slowly turning around, Yang Fan saw a man with ape arms and a long body, wearing a round collar long gown. He had a scarf on his head and a 1,000-bull saber hanging from his ribs. His hand gripped the saber hilt tightly, and his posture was as steady as a mountain. This person was standing on the small path, looking at him. Beside him was a pear tree, and the glistening yellow pears bent the branches, as if they were about to touch his shoulders. 1,000 bulls, ready Shin, Jiehui. Yang Fan recognized him at a glance. Chapter 72. Yang Fan immediately recognized his identity. Oh, I saw that there was no one here, so it's convenient. Yang Fan put on an embarrassed expression. There was a toilet, but he did not go. Seeing that there was no one around, he peed in someone else's garden. Of course, he would be embarrassed if someone saw him. Yang Fan's attitude was impeccable. Jing did not know the rules of the market and was used to peeing everywhere. His actions were also not considered outrageous. Shin Jiehui frowned in disgust and coldly glanced at him. In a deep voice, he said, "Be more vigilant. The assassin has not come for 3 days. I'm afraid he will appear tonight. If you can find him, you must warn us. Once he is caught, there will be a great reward." Shin Jiehui's eyes were a little red. He hadn't had a good night's sleep for the past few days. He had been waiting for the assassin to kill, but in the end, he didn't even see the shadow of the assassin. Right now, he was really a little exhausted. If it wasn't for the desire to avenge his brother supporting him, he would have long fallen asleep. Yes. Don't worry, Master General. Did you not see me walking around? I dare not slack off. Shin Jiehui grunted and turned to leave. Yang Fan suddenly exclaimed, "Huh? What is that?" "What?" Shin Jiehui suddenly turned his head. His saber was unsheathed. Before the sound of the saber stopped, he had already jumped to Yang Fan's side. His movements were extremely agile. Yang Fan pointed at the grass. With a face full of surprise, he said, "Master General, look over there. What is that?" Shin Jiehui looked over and asked in confusion, "Where? What did you find?" Before he could finish his sentence, Shin Jiehui felt a great pain in his dantian. Without thinking, he raised his elbow and struck at Yang Fan. Yang Fan's attack was successful and he immediately floated away. Shin Jiehui's strike was so close to Yang Fan's clothes that he flew 2 feet away. Shin Jiehui looked down. His lower abdomen was bleeding profusely. It had already dyed his robes red. When he did not notice, he still had some strength. But when he saw the wound on his body, he felt all his strength leave his body. He suddenly raised his head and glared fiercely at Yang Fan. Yang Fan had a saber hanging from his ribs, and it was still there. At some point in time, he was holding a dagger in his hand, and fresh blood was dripping from the edge of the dagger. Shin Jiehui had interrogated 2 of Yang Longzhong's subordinates who had fought with the assassins, and had also tested his martial arts with them. The result was naturally a complete victory. Therefore, he believed that since the 2 of them were evenly matched with the assassin's martial arts would not be too high. Because of this, he could not understand how Lu Kuei, who had the steadiest, sharpest, and the best martial arts among the 4 of them, could be beheaded just by sitting there without moving. Now he knew and at the same time he also knew that his life had come to an end. The only thing he wanted to do now was to publicize his identity as an assassin and let his brothers know, lest they followed in his footsteps. The assassin is... Shin Jiahui took a deep breath, and without a word of nonsense, he shouted at the top of his lungs. But as soon as he opened his mouth, he found that the young man, who was standing 20 feet away, had already appeared in front of him like a ghost. Shen Jiahui had always been proud of his agility, but now he realized that this person was faster than him, much faster than him. Stab! The person leaped in front of him. Guessed. The dagger was put away, and the saber was raised horizontally with a halo like a wheel. Yes. Puff! With a sound, a head flew. The moment the head flew, Yang Fan's heart felt like it was scalded by boiling oil, and there was an indescribable pain, but also an indescribable pleasure in the pain. He vaguely saw his sister's silhouette, running like a deer in the wilderness, saw a spurt of blood and a head flying high into the air. Who's shouting? What matter? Someone come quickly. The displeased and angry voice quickly turned into the frightened squeal of a sheep. It came from the mouth of an official from the Ministry of Justice, who rushed over in response. Yang Fan had already escaped like a rabbit, and before he left, he stabbed the wound on Shen Jiahui's lower abdomen, making it difficult to tell what kind of sharp weapon it was. When he rushed into the grass, he did not forget to take the 2 pieces of the bottom of the iron pot with him. His serious understanding and record of every grass, every tree, every pavilion, and every pavilion in the Yang residence played a huge role at this time. Yang Fan moved like a rabbit and like a falcon. He disappeared in an instant. While the backyard was in an uproar, Yang Fan had already washed the knife in the pond where he had doggy-paddled and put it back at his waist. The pond water slightly rippled with a touch of red, but it was immediately melted by the entire pond water. It was so faint that it could no longer be seen as a trace of blood. Endless amounts of enemy blood, endless amounts of enemy heads. Sooner or later, he would dye this pool of water red. Who is the assassin? How could he so accurately find my people and eliminate them? In Yang Mingxing's bedroom, Kai Dongqing asked angrily. Kai Dongqing had been in the army for a long time, and from a small soldier, he had killed his way to the high position of lieutenant general. Now that he had such a high position and power, he did not need to be angry, and when he occasionally flared up, his murderous aura was even more daunting. But his angry appearance did not affect Yang Mingxing in the slightest. Yang Mingxing could not see, and even if he could see, he would not be afraid. Kai Dongqing's murderous aura was cultivated in the army, and it was forged in the bloody battles between 2 armies. Yang Mingxing was only a civil official, and he had not even personally killed a person. But when he shouted, "Behead!" and the heads fell to the ground, almost none of them were peddlers or common people. There were many officials that Yang Mingxing had personally sentenced to death, and among them there was no lack of officials with the same rank as Kai Dongqing, and even officials with higher ranks, even members of Li Tang's imperial clan and relatives of the emperor. He had sentenced them to death and supervised their executions. How could Kai Dongqing be able to scare him? Yang Mingxing sat on the bed and sneered again and again. Since this person was able to find me, it can be seen how much effort he put into it. This person is scheming and must have been investigating me since a long time ago. He must have found out everything about me. And now your people are so ostentatious, afraid that people don't know that he is the Grand Thousand Oxen. You held a funeral in my mansion, and everyone knew about it. Think about it. How could he not know? This doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. Kai Dongqing paced back and forth in the room. With each step, the floor sank, giving off a muffled thud. Losing 2 generals in a row, he felt heartache, really heartache. These 4 people were not only brothers who had followed him for many years and had deep feelings for him, but they were also the main force that controlled the left Fengchen guards, the 4 great confidants. Confidants could not be cultivated if one wanted to. Just one loyalty was not easy to obtain. Could a person that was casually promoted be as reliable as the old subordinates that had followed him for 20 years? Furthermore, without enough ability, how could they help him control the proud and valiant soldiers of the left Fengtian guards? With 12,000 oxen, who knew how many people were eyeing these positions, once there were vacancies, how could he casually promote a few of his own people? He was like a trapped lion, his eyes red. Even so, how could he accurately identify the identities of my people? They are all wearing civilian clothes. How could that person find them in the mansion and not kill a single person? Kai Dongqing suddenly stopped and turned his head to look at Yang Mingsheng. He said with slight surprise, "No, there must be a traitor in your mansion." Yang Mingsheng said angrily, "T. My family is very strict. Those who can work in my mansion are all people that I know very well. Among them, the shortest time has already been under my command for 2 to 3 years. All of them are loyal and devoted." Kai Dongqing said calmly, "Loyal? You actually believe in loyalty? If people's hearts can be trusted, how could the 100 or so people of Xiaozhou's Peach Blossom Village be killed?" Yang Mingsheng asked in reply, "If you don't believe in loyalty, then do you think that Lu Kuei, Xin Jiahui, and the others, if the word prophet was in front of them, would betray you?" Kai Dongqing said gloomily, "As long as there are enough benefits, why wouldn't they betray me?" Yang Mingsheng laughed mischievously. "It's a pity that Lu Kuei and Xin Jiahui are not far away. If they heard what you said, they would definitely be very sad." Kai Dongqing's expression changed as he said, "Of course there are people who are loyal and devoted, but as a person in a high position, if one were to blindly entrust his subordinates' reliability to their loyalty and not take any precautions, that would be the greatest stupidity." Yang Mingsheng nodded lightly and said approvingly, "That's right. I agree with what you said, but I still don't believe that the traitor came from my subordinates. Didn't the mansion transfer a lot of patrolmen from the Ministry of Justice and Luoyang Prefecture, as well as Marquis Wu's workshop? If there was someone who tipped off the assassin, it must have come from one of them." Kai Dongqing shook his head. "Impossible. The officials from the Ministry of Justice and Luoyang Prefecture were appointed by their superiors after the incident. No one knew beforehand that they would definitely be sent over. As for the Marquis of the workshop, there was no need to talk about it. It was because of a lack of manpower that he had been transferred over at the last minute. The people that were transferred over were even arranged by the workshop manager and the bad commander. How could the assassin have made contact with any of them beforehand? After they moved into your mansion, they practically never left it. Even if they did leave in such a short period of time, whether it was through threats or promises, it would be impossible for them to become the assassin's accomplices. Yang Longzhong, unless you have enemies all over the world, and the Ministry of Justice, Luoyang Prefecture, the Xiuan Workshop's thugs, Basho, and everyone else all join hands to deal with you, then it would be possible for them to collude. So, if there is a suspicion, it must come from your mansion." Kai Dongqing's analysis was very reasonable, and Yang Mingsheng's faith couldn't help but be shaken. He was silent for a moment, then asked, "Then what do you plan to do?" Chapter 73. Kai Dongqing slightly narrowed his eyes, pondered for a moment, and said, "For that assassin, we have not been able to find any clues so far. Perhaps this traitor is the key to catching him. What we need to do now is to plan and dig out this traitor first. I intend to." Kai Dongqing lowered his voice and whispered to Yang Mingsheng. Yang Mingsheng nodded and said, "All right. I also want to see who in my mansion has eaten the heart of a bear and the heart of a leopard to dare to do such a thing." He raised his head. Although his whole face was covered with layers of white cloth and nothing could be seen, he still habitually raised his head and looked at Kai Dongqing and said, "About the Peach Blossom Village case, should we tell him about it?" Kai Dongqing sneered and said, "What we did back then was so unclean. Yet we actually left a fish that escaped the net. Once he finds out about this, who knows if he won't blame us. Now that we've been messed up by this fish that escaped the net, it's not like you don't know that master's temper. So what if he finds out? How could someone as high and mighty as him care about this person and this matter? He dared to kill them all. In the end, this matter still has to be settled by the two of us. We don't have to suffer his scolding for nothing. Kai Dongqing heaved a sigh of relief. Looking at Yang Mingxing's appearance that was neither human nor ghost, he mocked. I've always been curious. You've become like this, neither human nor ghost, so what are you still alive for? If you die earlier, it will be a good thing for your enemies and friends. Kai Dongqing flicked his sleeve and left. When he reached the side of the screen, he suddenly stopped, turned his head around, and said maliciously, Even to your family, it is a good thing. Dr. Yang, you can be considered the first person in the entire world to be able to live up to your standards. How admirable. Hearing his footsteps getting further and further away, Yang Mingsheng suddenly clenched his fists. After clenching them for a long time, he slowly loosened them and muttered to himself, Why do I start to hope that the assassin will succeed? That day, Kai Dongqing made a trip back to Fengqinggard and continued to ask for leave from his superior. When he returned, he brought back 30 soldiers, each with a bow and arrow. Mobilizing an army, even if it was just a few people, was no small matter. It was impossible to mobilize troops without a military order. It was even more taboo for an officer to do a patrol officer's job. Normally, the army would not agree to it. If such an exception was made, would the army still be an army? The Ministry of Justice, the Supreme Court, and the Luoyang Prefecture were also unwilling. If they had to mobilize their troops just because of a case, wouldn't they become decorations? Wouldn't that mean that they were incompetent officials? However, this case in Yang Longzhong's residence was really too big of a commotion. First, a dignified disciplinary officer of the Ministry of Justice was crippled, and then 2,000 oxen were beheaded in the Yang family. It was said that even the high and mighty empress knew about this case. It was the empress who personally asked about this matter, and only then did Fengqinggard allow Kai Dongqing to borrow 30 soldiers. They were also given bows and arrows from the armory that could not be used unless it was for battle or training. It was said that because of this matter, the Luoyang Prefecture was also under a lot of pressure. However, with such a large city like Luoyang, they really could not spare any more officials. Therefore, Luoyang Commandant Tang Zong personally came with 30 people. They were all smart and capable Marquis Wu and workshop attendants who were selected from the various workshops. Tang Zong paired the people he brought with the Yang family servants and guards, as well as Marquis Wu's workshop attendants. The old led the new, and they patrolled together to strengthen the Yang family's security. When these workshop attendants and Marquis Wus were brought to the Yang family, Yang fans saw that although they deliberately staggered their formation, their backs were still straight and their expressions were still stern. Yang fan couldn't help but reveal a thoughtful expression. They did not whisper to each other, nor did they make faces or giggle. As expected, they were smart and capable Marquis Wu and workshop attendants. At this moment, Ma Qiao walked over to him with 3 trembling steps and said excitedly, with so many people all of a sudden, "We're much safer." Yang Fan looked at Ma Fan's legs that were trembling like springs, then looked at the new workshop attendants and Marquis Wu's, who all had steady and powerful legs. He smiled lightly. Yes, this time it's really much safer. At night, Yang Mingxing's mansion was guarded every 3 steps, and there was a sentry every 5. Marquis Wu's workshop attendants came and went without rest. Although there were many people, they maintained absolute silence. Other than the rustling of footsteps, nothing else could be heard. This strict atmosphere was like a military fortress. In a pentagonal pavilion, Huang Qilin, who was well prepared, sat on a stone table. On the stone table in front of him was a pot of wine and a fat chicken. He had already eaten more than half of the fat chicken that weighed at least 5 catties. In front of him was a pile of chicken bones, which had all been eaten cleanly. Huang Qilin had a round body. Although his body was rather fat, he did not give off the feeling of being bloated or slow. Among the 4 Ironwall brothers, he was the youngest and ranked last, but because of his fat body, he seemed to be slightly older than the other brothers. On his left sat the Minister of Justice, Wang Lu, who had single-handedly knocked Yang Fan into the pond. On his right sat the Yang residence's protector, Hua Shaoqian. Yang Fan and a new workshop attendant stood leaning against the pillar of the pavilion. Huang Qilin spat out a piece of chicken bone, wiped his greasy mouth, and sneered, "This time we've mobilized the army. I want to see if that assassin can outrun the bow and arrow." Ever since Hua Shaoqian escaped death that night, he has been in a state of panic. Hearing this, he could not help but ask worriedly Huang Beishan, "That assassin comes and goes without a trace. Can the bow and arrow deal with him?" Huang Qilin grunted, "You don't have to make him sound so godly. I, Huang Beishan, have seen experts before, but no matter how powerful they are, their speed cannot outrun the bow and arrow. Have you ever heard of a so-called expert who is invincible on the battlefield and can fight 100 enemies alone?" Wang Lu, the Minister of Justice, could not help but ask, "Huang Beishan, since the commander of the palace guards has requested for the army to be mobilized, and the bow and arrow are specially approved, why not transfer some crossbows over? Aren't crossbows more powerful than bows?" Huang Qilin gave him a look that was not a smile and said, "You have never been in the army before, so naturally you do not understand the logic." Wang Lu's face reddened, and he cupped his hands, saying, "I was just about to ask Huang Beishan for advice." Huang Qilin threw down a chicken bone, wiped his mouth, and said, "It is true that the crossbow has a longer range than the bow, and that the shot is more accurate and lethal. But the crossbow also has areas where it is inferior to the bow. As the saying goes, 5 arrows for 1 crossbow. This means that for a skilled archer, it takes the effort of shooting 5 arrows before the crossbow can fire 1 arrow. We cannot transfer more soldiers here, and this manor is full of flowers and pavilions. If 1 arrow misses, the assassin will disappear without a trace. How can we use the crossbow to capture his figure? Besides, this is not like the front of 2 armies. The crossbow is heavier than the bow and is much larger. It is not convenient for a single soldier to carry it around." Huang Qilin picked up another piece of chicken and said, "Besides, for a first-rate archer, the lethality of the bow is not necessarily inferior to the crossbow. When our Tang dynasty's famous General Shui Rengui was the chief commander of the Tiela Road army, he was going to lead the army to the west. Before he left, Emperor Gaozong gave him a banquet to bid him farewell. During the banquet, Emperor Gaozong said to General Shui, 'I have long heard that General is good at archery. The ancients who were good at archery could pierce through 7 layers of armor with 1 arrow. Today, why don't you try shooting an arrow through 5 layers of armor for me to see?' At the time, I was on the military field and was standing closest to the general selection stage, so I heard everything clearly. When General Shui heard the imperial edict, he ordered someone to bring his precious bow. With 1 arrow, he pierced through 5 layers of leather armor. Emperor Gaozong turned pale with fright when he saw this and immediately ordered someone to bring his own radiant iron armor for General Shui to put on, afraid that General Shui would be hit by an arrow on the battlefield. Hey, normal armor can't even block a sharp arrow, much less a flying bandit who relies on lightness kung fu to fly high and low. This military bow is enough to deal with him. As long as he is hit by an arrow, he can forget about escaping." When Hua Shaoqian and the Ministry of Justice heard Huang Qilin's words, they couldn't help but gasp in surprise. In the military system of the early Tang dynasty, armored soldiers made up 60% of the total army. However, due to the limitations of steel production and different battlefield environments, coupled with the restraint of powerful bows and crossbows and the vast battlefield, there were many ways to avoid direct confrontation with the heavy cavalry. The heavy cavalry, which was costly and ineffective in actual combat, had basically retired from the stage of history. Therefore, at that time, the main types of armor were leather, wooden, cloth, and silk armors. There were not many who wore iron armor. That flexible and thick leather armor may not be able to be pierced through with a single stab, and when they are stacked together, they will have a cushioning effect. However, the Tang Bao was able to pierce through 5 layers of leather armor with one arrow. One can imagine its power on the battlefield. As Yang Fan listened to their conversation, he couldn't help but laugh coldly to himself. He now completely understood the other party's intentions. Transferring the archers here was indeed to strengthen the defense of the Yang residents. They hoped to use the bows and arrows to kill the assassins, but those 30 so-called workers and Marquis Yang Fan looked at the worker opposite him, who was said to be from Chongzheng Workshop. This brother was called Duan Weifeng. Old Duan stood as straight as a javelin with his eyes looking straight ahead. Even when he glanced left and right, his attitude was very alert and his posture was also very serious. Yang Fan couldn't help but sigh secretly. Kai Dongqing should have found some ruffians instead of so many elite soldiers. A well-trained elite soldier's every move had long become a habit. How could it be so easy for them to pretend to be Marquis Wu's workers? Obviously, the inexplicable deaths of Lu Kuei and Shan Jiahui had already made them suspicious. They suspected that there were assassins or accomplices of assassins in the Yang residence, so they used 2 methods, one in the open and one in the dark. In the open, they transferred 30 archers in charge of dealing with the assassins to strengthen the deterrent effect. And in the dark, they were the soldiers pretending to be Marquis Wu's workers. If the assassins were in the residence, or if the assassins had accomplices in the residence, then the other 30 soldiers pretending to be Marquis Wu's workers would be responsible for dragging them out. Yang Fan secretly raised his vigilance. He couldn't do it step by step. He had to end the battle quickly.